is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.
The Cal Committee. A short notice I've had to take the chair, but I understand the chairman will be here in about half an hour. You're all very welcome. Remind members to switch off their mobile phones and also people in the public gallery. Do you have any apologies?
Chair, nothing at the minute. We're expecting a full turnout, so I expect members have just got slightly held up.
Okay, thank you. You have the draft minutes. Are we all agreed? The accuracy of the draft minutes.
Agreed.
Any comments?
There's just my name spelled wrong there.
Oh, we will correct that. Apologies.
Spelling mistake?
Yes. Apologies.
We'll have to get it right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry.
Move on, and we all agreed.
We
Right.
correct that for the final version.
Right, thank you. Okay, it takes us on then to the next item.
Chair, our first briefing this morning is, we have two briefings this morning as part of the inquiry members. The first is from Cultus, and then we also have the Confederation of Ulster Bands as well. So if I can refer members to the memo, page 10 in their packs, the clerk's memo, with just a bit of background around Cultus. And there's a briefing paper from Cultus as well at page 15. So if members are ready to begin, we can call in Cultus. His name's Brendan.
Just a moment.
When did you expect her? Ronnie's coming in.
Ronnie.
Told him once I said if you're welcome. Yeah. Good question.
Morning, how are you? Morning, Brendan and Grania. You're very welcome. So make yourself comfortable there, and when you're ready, lead off. Take it you're leading off, Brendan.
Yes.
As the rector. It says rector here.
Here we did a literal translation. I imagine there's more nuance than that, but that was our literal
Rather as an organiser, regional organiser is a sort of general dog's body. Is another term that can be used for
Okay.
the.
You're welcome, so.
Yeah. We'll just lead off. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity, Chair and committee members. Quick introduction. This is Grania Scullion, one of our volunteers within Cultus from Castlewell, Newcastle branch, and I am Brendan McAleer, to say the organiser for Cultus within Ulster here. What we're going to focus on within the opening statement is the what is Cultus, our work of Cultus, where we work, what we see are the barriers, perceived barriers to the arts, and how we look to overcome these, and the benefits that Cultus bring, both monetary and socially. And I'm going to let Grania take over here and go through sort of what is Cultus and the work that we do.
Okay, thanks, Brendan. So, Cultus, or to give it its full name, Cultus Cultúraí Éireann, and we'll sometimes refer to it as Cultus and sometimes CCE, that would be the two abbreviations for it. It was founded in 1951, and as part of our constitution, we're a non-profit, non-sectarian, non-political cultural movement. Now, it started as a grassroots organisation to preserve and promote Irish music, song, dance and the language, and it's grown substantially over the years, and now we currently have over 40,000 members. Our members are spread across the world. We have members obviously throughout Ireland, England, Scotland, Wales, across Europe, North America, South America, Australia and Japan. So we're right across the world. Within Ulster, you can see its popularity from the All-Ireland Fly in Derry in 2013, where we had over 430,000 attendees, bringing approximately 42 million into the economy. In Ulster Fly each year, we have approximately 25,000 people attend, and again, it's worth about just under 2.25 million to the local economy. We have 75 branches within Ulster, right across the counties, and we have branches in rural areas and in urban areas as well. They range in size and they range in the activities that they can provide. Now, what do we actually do? Well, Cultus starts at branch level, where everybody is a member of a branch. I'm a member of Newcastle branch, which is in Castlewellan, strangely. And we start with classes, with sessions, with concerts, with talks, with ceilidhs. sometimes individual branches or maybe smaller branches group together to run activities together, and weekend events, master classes, that sort of thing. The main focus of our year then are the FLANA. Now a FLA, or a festival, consists of a few different things. There's 49 competitions in at least mostly 4 different age groups, ranging from music, song, dance, excuse me. Then, as well as the competitions, that's the focus of a weekend, we also have concerts, we have talks, we have parades, we have sessions. And every county has a FLA, and then people move on from the county FLA to the provincial FLA, and then from the provincial FLA to the All-Ireland FLA. Now, it's called an All-Ireland FLA, but really it's a world FLA because we have competitors from America, from Europe, and everything. This is the core work that we would do, but we're also involved in lots of other activities, including training for our members in their various roles. We work with different organisations. So, for example, my own branch works with the Irish Language Organisation in the area. We work with different charities. One of our big charity initiatives would be Trad for Trócaire, that we take part in every September, October time. We also run trips, exchanges. My own branch, we've been to Chicago, we've been to Florida, we've played at festivals in France. And really, the main work is that all branches, we strive to promote the best opportunities and experiences for all our members, and particularly young people. So I'll pass you back to Brendan to...
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to move on now, I suppose, to the focus of the investigation on the arts and working classes. And I suppose we'll talk from our own experience. And first of all, what makes Cultus accessible? As Gráinne said, we're first and foremost a community-based volunteer cultural movement. Local people are more accessible and approachable for those engaging for the first time with the arts. And we see that as an essential tool to get people to engage. They're able to engage with their neighbours, with people from their own community before they're looking to go towards more formalised arts venues. Again, our large geographical footprint, the 75 branches across Ulster, and as we said, they're mostly rural, they're spread across the province, but we also have branches in Belfast, Derry, Omagh, Portadown, etc. And we are always looking to expand, so if anyone knows of an area that needs a branch, give us a call. We'll not be long getting together. Barriers, as we see them, to people engaging with the arts, I suppose from our point of view, awareness, location, opportunity and cost would be what we see are the main barriers. Now again, as I said, our wide geographical footprint helps us to negate some of the barriers such as location, opportunity and awareness. We are continually working hard to increase awareness of the work that Cultus does through social networks, websites, traditional media, be that newspapers and radio, etc. But also through our own network and other organisations that we would work with, other links that we have made within the community also help us to do that. But one of the main awareness raising tools is that our events are community-based events. They're organised by community volunteers, assisted by the structure of Cultus, but it is mainly community-based ones. This allows communities to feel a sense of ownership of the events, of the classes, of the branch itself, and creates that community buy-in, and in turn the community do a lot of the awareness raising for us in their areas. Our volunteers also would have links to other community organisations, be that churches, schools, the GA and many, many others. But again, when we talk about awareness, it's an experience I'm sure anybody that has been involved in a community group has been through. For example, our plan, we can have people from New York or from mainland Europe at the event, and you'll talk to someone a week later that lives 10 miles down the road who didn't know it was on. You know, really, our job is to make sure the information is there, but it is for people themselves looking to engage that they go seeking that information. I think that's a vitally important point to make. Again, when we look at location, as I said, our footprint helps us negate that, but from an arts point of view, arts events are quite often held in urban areas. They're in formal arts building, which in itself can be a barrier for someone to go into that. They can feel intimidating. It can be hard to get that first foot across the threshold, sort of thing. But Cultus, again, our events would be organised by community, within the community, or would be in a community-based building, which is normally familiar to people and can often include a family member. And that allows for that first-time engagement with arts and culture, and people can build from that base. The one big one we would see is opportunity and cost. Cultists feel that everyone should have the opportunity to engage with the arts, especially with ourselves, and the cost should not be a barrier. And we look at a number of ways to negate that there. We have a low-cost structure, approximately about £3 per class. And if you look at it in terms of music, for example, singing, everyone has a voice within them. Most people would have the voice within them, and they can attend a singing class for very low money. A tin whistle can cost £4, and that at least gets someone on that road to starting. We would also have a lot of free events, especially within our FLAs, the street sessions, singing sessions, bar sessions, but we'd also essentially have alcohol-free areas for youth sessions and things like that there, so that people can engage without any cost to them, and again within their own local community. We have instrument rental schemes for more expensive instruments, for the likes of ourselves, for pipes, for harps, for concertinas, instruments like that there, that people can rent them for a while. They're not out that huge money before a child or a young person would start playing the music. We also do family discounts, but essentially Cultists will work with families and with people all across to make sure that every child has the opportunity. If a family is in difficulty money-wise, they would look to work with them to ensure the child gets an opportunity, and the cost or poverty should never be a barrier to people. Now, the social impact of Cultists. Yes, Cultists most obviously will raise cultural awareness and helps artists within our community earn a living. But outside of that there, maybe not as obvious, are the benefits of increased confidence and capacity through our events and classes. It develops effective event leadership skills and builds community confidence, building that social capital, building that community attachment. It creates community engagement and partnership working through the events in our Mehel initiative. If we look back at the likes of the All-Ireland FLA in Derry 2013, we look at some of the engagement there with the district councils, the local bands association, the GAA, the rugby, PSNI, the local Cultaland there, and many other groups were involved in partnership working to deliver that event. It also has the intergenerational relations, tackling isolation and mental health problems, giving our older people a feeling of self-worth within that sense of bridging the generational gap, skills sharing, intergenerational relations. Through the handing down of the tradition, the older people are continually educating the younger and vice versa, learning from them. And again, when we look at education, the numbers attending our classes in Flanagh are on the increase year on year. We have 6,000 members across Ulster and 4,500 people taking part in our classes. They mightn't be huge numbers, but if you look at the number of people we engage with across the year, we engage with over 60,000 people across Ulster each year, and they're age ranging from 8 to 88. You know, there are so many people engaging, and outside of our own organisation, the amount of people learning traditional music, learning the traditional arts, is on the increase year on year, thankfully. And through that, it instills that lifelong learning attitude within our young people. Then when we look at volunteering, Cultists fosters that spirit of volunteerism among young and old, and that in turn can have benefits to people when they're going seeking jobs. They've gained some experience, be it in events management, be it in all the different aspects that we would hold. Then good relations work. Again, we look back, I suppose it was the biggest event we've held here in the north, to Derry, and we look at how the two main traditions were able to come together and celebrate a cultural event. And again, I stand to be corrected in saying that it's probably one of the only cultural events that both traditions came together, celebrated well, and went away feeling they got something from the event. And again, with satisfaction surveys coming out of that for Derry of over 80% across the board, and the Ulster FLA as well, is a smaller event, but satisfaction survey went across at 95% across the board. Also in that there, when we look at the economic impact of Cultists to the economy here. Again, we go back to the likes of the All-Ireland FLA in 2013, 430,000 people coming in, and for the Ulster FLA, smaller event, yes, but held in a much smaller location, 25,000 people coming in. And those figures have to be held in the sense that the population of Derry under 110,000, the population of Dromore, where the Ulster Fleadh was, under 1,500. So that's a huge influx of people coming into those areas. The economic outturn from 2013 from Cultus was over 45 million into the local economy. And legacy from that is it contributes to the economic stability of the region, but also, and especially for the smaller events, to the economic stability of rural businesses and smaller businesses. Now, I know we're here at DCAL, and I suppose I'll finish up here now, but just to say that this investigation is thankfully being ran by the CAL committee here, but the works of Cultus, and I'm sure of many other arts organisations that have been in to see yourselves, cuts across so many other departments. Like we say, DCAL to engaging people with the arts, OFM, DFM from cross-community relations and good relations and citizenship, and then DETI to the tourism, and DSD through volunteering. We feel the work of Cultus is very important, and we hope that it will continue for many years to come, and we hope you do also. And we welcome any questions at this stage. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much, Brendan Grania. It's quite informative. I found it quite interesting. I suppose coming from the unionist tradition, what are you doing to broaden the appeal for people like myself and my other colleagues to gain interest in your culture and to, I suppose there's a strong perception that it's all one way. What are you doing to
I think
improve
we're trying,
that?
in lots of small ways, within branches to try and do that. So, for example, the Presbyterian minister in Castlewellan is a member of Cultus and
That's scary, I think.
and is very involved with the local branch. So,
Right.
but then in bigger ways with our Fleadhs now over the last few years, we've really tried to engage. Well, we've started with the bands. Every Fleadh has a parade, and we've tried to engage with bands from both communities. So it means then that we can get more involvement from the unionist community in that Fleadh.
And also within that, there, especially for our bigger events, we would be we would be approaching all the churches within whatever area, say for Dromore, we would approach the churches that for the service on the weekend of the Fleadh, that there would be music or traditional music of whatever ilk that they would want put into the church service just to celebrate the Fleadh being there. We also look at the engagement from 2013 with the Bands Association in the North West and the likes of the Pride play being put on during the All-Ireland Fleadh Day. Like, each Fleadh at the minute now we're looking at developing community engagement strategies as well for each of our county and provincial Fleadhs, and it is really to try and welcome everyone to the event and let everyone see that it's a cultural celebration in a non-threatening way.
You mentioned the City of Culture and how it was able to attract both communities.
Yes.
How was that achieved?
By a very, very talented person, I would say, is the best way. It was one of the big things that was set out at the very start, was to try and get whole community buy-in. There was also events held on both sides of the river, which opened it up to everyone. I know there was one person, I didn't actually get their name, said that when how we got so much buy-in from it was that, and I apologise, not my words, Derry people are inherently nosy and wanted to see what was going on, and that it started with a trickle coming across the new bridge, and that by the Friday, Saturday of the week, it was a flood coming across. Everyone wanted to see, everyone wanted to come in to see what was happening, and I think it was a very good festival atmosphere. And again, as I said, events on both sides of the river really helped show all communities that they were welcome to it.
John, thanks very much. Okay, we'll move on to the members. Cahill, you're first.
Vice Chair, Corbagov, Brendan Grania, and as a Derry person, I'd take no offence, I might say. As I say, a long time goer to Fleadhs and fishing and what have you down through the years. I definitely was in Derry over the All-Ireland, and I think the general feeling right across the board, and it wasn't just a nationalist unionist divide, there was a north-south thing there which was a big factor in it, and I think certainly the Fleadh Derry dispelled a whole lot of myths and legends that had gone before, and I think it's it's changed utterly, as it's what I said. So the figure itself, I say, it was a very movable feast. Now, I wondered actually how, over the course of the week, you came to the figure of 430,000. Some people actually put that a lot more. So I'm wondering how that was quantified, and was there any indication, Brendan, about the origins in terms of where they came from, their outlooks or whatever, the makeup of that? Because it was a very fluid thing, as the flies are, like, and it's very hard to quantify and get qualitative information on that.
Yeah. Well, the 430,000 is the PSNI figure. That's the official PSNI figure that came in. And in relation to where the people came from, rough figures are 60% from the north, and there was, of that, 50% roughly were from the county of Derry itself. But more importantly, there's 10% from England, Scotland, Wales, and I think it's 3.75 from America, and around 3.4 from the rest of Europe. Again, we did an economic and social impact study, an independent economic and social impact study of the event. We did one for the Ulster Fleadh and for the All Ireland in 2013, and they would have surveyed a number of people at the Fleadh independent surveys, and that's where the figures are coming from for that.
Yeah, that's good to know. That the other one you were saying about the costings of tuition and learning and what have you, and probably started at the lower end of the level there with the likes of tin whistles and the oral singing and what have you. But when you go to the upper end there, you're looking at things like oven pipes and accordions and all sorts of, which are very, very expensive. Yeah. Is there funding there that there is for other, and the Keeley bands as well? Is there funding there that exists?
There's lots of help available for, from my own personal experience. I started learning the concertina about 5 years ago, and a bit late to the game, and I didn't know if I was going to like it, so the branch, they lend out a concertina for £20 for the entire year, and to see if you're actually going to enjoy it. And they do that obviously with people of all ages. And then when I decided I wanted to buy a concertina myself, which was about £1,000, the branch gave me a no interest loan, and I could pay it over whatever amount of time I wanted to. And that would happen with all branches. We're always fundraising to try and ensure that the cost isn't something that puts people off.
How much money comes from Central? So it comes from, say, DCAL or the Arts Council or whatever for? Well,
currently funding-wise, from the Arts Council we get 34,000, but that's ring-fenced almost to our flags. We're trying to negotiate with them to see if there's a possibility of opening it up to other weekend festivals and classes and things like that there.
But nothing for equipment or such?
No, nothing for equipment. They do have a fund for marching bands, but the likes of Keeley bands and that there, they don't have one. But on instruments, there is a fund as well called the Take It Away Fund, which the Arts Council run, which allows you to go to, there's a number of recognised retailers across the north where you can go in, it's a 10% deposit, and you pay it over 10 months for the instrument.
Right, and just given the economic value of Flaccio and the Heron, some 42 million according to estimates, what plans are there to try and push for the Irish city culture for 2016, or indeed the European city culture, I think it's 2021, is it?
Well, again, it's up to the branches, really. I think you're saying push for the likes of the All Ireland Fleadh to return.
All Ireland Fleadh back to there, of course. This is
yes.
Not your home, of course. Like,
yeah. There is. It's up to the branches to pitch for the event, and at the minute, there has been some talk about applications coming in, but we don't have any formal applications in, and it would just be then. The pitch would come in from a local branch. And then that would go to their county board, to Ulster, and on then to the Ard Corla, where the vote is taken as to where it would go. Obviously, given the economic value of it, a number of areas are looking now at the All Ireland Fleadh as a serious event, and a lot of people are coming in to look for it. But again, it's something for myself, as the organiser within Ulster, I'd love to see it coming back in, because it's a huge event, and again, it raises awareness of Cultus and the work that we do across the board.
Okay. Okay, we also had Martin McGuinness being regaled by a unionist band out there on the city walls at the time, which I think is probably a memory that will be remain for that. So
What was that?
he was regaled by I think one or two bands from the other tradition.
He's moved on.
Well, somebody's moved on from a good Kyle.
Right. Karen, how are you on the tin whistle? Are you good?
Oh, I could play it, yeah.
That's good, right.
Just about. Thanks very much for your presentation. Cathal has touched on a few things that I was going to touch on, but I'm not going to repeat them. So I'll go into, he did talk about funding. Do you get funding from the GAA?
No.
Although most of your branches would maybe use GAA halls to...
Well, some
because
do.
of rural, you know, the rural and they don't have maybe a community facility and so the GAA open their doors to like your musicians there that they're able to practice or hold events and stuff.
And there would be a kind of a unofficial or, you know, relationship with the GAA and
Yeah.
for the... If they need musicians, we would provide musicians. A lot of our musicians also play sports
yeah.
for GAA, but there's no there's no money changing hands between the two.
Yeah, but I suppose in kind,
Yeah.
the use of their building, and that's very, very important
Yeah.
to keep that link going. You know?
There's a good relationship between
Yes,
the two organisations.
Yeah. I'd like to say the All Ireland Flat actually coming to Warrenpoint. Like, a number of years ago, in fact, we were very, very close to it.
Yeah.
So I would like to see maybe more involvement with the like of local government, particularly with the change now, to see, you know, can we boost that tourism, particularly for the southern end of South Down with the like of maybe bidding for the All Ireland Flower to come. So I would try and encourage all our local cultus branches to put that bid forward for Warrenpoint. Because we have, and the input that is, and I don't think is are selling yourselves enough as far as the musicians for the involvement that they take their talent into school and they play in their school orchestra to the like of the Fiddler's Green Festival in Rostrevor where that talent is shown on the street. But more impressed where I was where the cruise ship came into Warrenpoint and they had a full you could walk every
Sorry,
couple
is
of...
this an advert? Yeah.
No, it's not. I'm getting to selling us that. More importantly, where the musicians were on the street and there was like a wee play going and you know, and people from all traditions were able to stand and tap the foot. To me, that's what the cultus is all about, and respecting the music. Not so much on the stage, but certainly on the streets with the people. That's where to me you get the goosebumps, you know. But it's a great organisation, and the Take It Away fund, where the families would pay 10%. Do you actually have a grant towards that you give families to coincide with that, or?
Again, as Gráinne said, a number of the branches would look to help out, but we don't have a sort of a grant fund, an official grant fund for it. Quite simply, we don't have the money for it. As I said, we get 34,000 from to the Ulster Council from the Arts Council, and that's the majority of the funding that we would get. I did a survey a few years ago in relation to local councils and what the branches were getting, and it worked out at 14,000 across the north was what was coming in. And at that stage, we weren't really getting any official Arts Council money. So again, we don't really have the funds centrally to be able to put out any grant aid for people to buy instruments.
Do you think that's putting people off? I know a lot of families
I think-
traditionally play and they share their instruments and
Yeah.
you know, cousins, aunties, uncles, niece, whatever. You know, do you think it's that putting people off
Well, I
and
think-
introduced instruments?
As Brenton said, you can start with a tin whistle, which doesn't cost much money. So that's open to everybody, or you can sing or you can dance, and you don't need to buy any instruments there. But I think I come from a very big branch, so there's a lot of members, there's a lot of classes, we can do a lot of fundraising because there's a lot of volunteers, that sort of thing. So we do have that facility where we can help families out with that no interest loan. But then within the county, you know, the way cultus is structured, you work at branch level, then county, then provincial, and if there's another branch within the county who maybe aren't as well off as or as successful as the Newcastle branch, aren't as big, maybe they're much smaller, maybe they've only got 100 members, they to help out within the county. You know, if there's anything that we could do with it, like we have a fundraising concert once a year where all branches come, and then that money is distributed around the branches who maybe are struggling a bit to buy instruments and things like that. So there's plenty of cooperation between us.
Thanks very much, Gov. Just keep one point here
Okay.
in the agenda.
You never miss a chance, do you? Right, David, see how you are in the tin whistle.
Thanks, Chair. Probably not so good. And thanks for your presentation this morning. And maybe we've been discussing so far Cultus itself and how you are dealing with awareness, location, opportunity and cost. Again, which I admire how you've been dealing with that and trying to overcome barriers. But sort of moving sideways on the inquiry, how do you find the collaboration with those who are actually responsible in Northern Ireland for the delivery of the arts? Should it be the Arts Council or some of the big venues, or the arts providers as such? How do you, has that been working out for you, or how do you find that as a relationship?
It's getting better, and I sort of agree with the point that we have for many years undersold ourselves. We have now, we're in the regularly funded organisations with the Arts Council, but again, we're getting the 34,000 in to the Ulster Council for the work of cultures within the North. And I would always be pushing the fact that, yes, that allows us to put some development into our FLAs, but it doesn't allow us to develop as an organisation. You know, we look at Cultus and see, again, the social impact we can have, the cultural impact we can have, but with that sort of money, you can't actually move that work forward. For example, like I'm the only employee in the North for Cultus, and I'm paid for through money got in Dublin. You know, so it's that sort of thing. There's just, we don't have the funding put into it. And again, that's the same story for a number of organisations, arts organisations, providers and community groups across the North. Our relationship is getting better, as I say, and we're looking to move forward from this point, but it's only in its infancy, is all we can say, really.
And just sorry, I'll add as well. You were saying about the organisations and the, the sort of venues. We would find as well now. Traditionally, Cultus would have worked in smaller venues if we were having a concert or a session or that sort of thing. But I think now, as Cultus has grown and as the members have grown in confidence that they can put on an event in a small location, we have now engaged more with bigger locations. So, for example, Loughley in Belfast have had a concert in the Waterfront Hall. The Strail Arts Centre in Oma, we've had different events in there. So we are engaging now with the bigger venues, but I think that is because members have got more confidence now that they can run the smaller events, that they feel they can sort of take on the challenge of a bigger.
But have the governing bodies or the providers, you're saying that the participants, because they've gained confidence, have been able to do that, but has there been help coming down from sort of those who are the arts providers as such?
Well, just as Brent said about it's getting better.
It's getting better, but
You don't
not
want to say
terribly
it's
well.
better.
Not terribly well. You know, we're not seen as any.
That's what we want to get to. That's
Yeah,
what
yeah,
we want to
it's-
hear.
Yes,
nuts
it's
and
not
bolts of
terribly
it,
well.
you know.
I suppose is the best. What we are getting, it's getting better.
Yeah.
Very
Okay.
diplomatic.
Thanks, David. Rosie is next.
Gurmai Cackerley, August Gurmai Duncarlacher. Thanks, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I mean, I know a bit about the FLA. I was at Clonmel one year, a great time. And I'm waiting for it to come to Belfast. So everybody's waiting for the FLA to come to their own part of the world because it's such a huge event and it's so successful. Can you just confirm a couple of things for me again? What did you say the figure was that it generated for the local economy in Derry?
The All Ireland area, 42 million.
42 million, that's a colossal figure. And what does it cost yourselves then to stage that event?
Yes, the delivery cost for that event was just under 1.5 million.
And
Of that, I would say that there was over $500,000 for health and safety. You know, so.
and were you funded?
There was a number of funders for that: the Derry City Councils, the City of Culture, The tourist board were involved. There was a small amount from the Arts Council as well.
Okay.
I can give you the exact figures if you wish.
Yeah, that's useful. Yeah, well, I mean, it's a fantastic achievement, like to generate that amount of money to a local economy. Tell me more about the involvement of the unionist bands, because that was a big development, and it was a really positive thing to see.
I suppose it came from an engagement with the Bands Forum, and it was they made a presentation to the FLA Executive Committee, and I was there myself that night, and they spoke about how the traditions are so similar in the sense of, and it's a thing that we would always say, the music is, our traditions are older than our divisions, in the sense the music is the same, the notation is the same, the words may be different, the name may be different, and they made that point very strongly, and they wanted to get involved, they wanted to really be involved, and unfortunately, if they came a wee bit earlier, it seems to be bands love competition. And that seems to be a big part of it. And they actually wanted to see if they could take part in the FLA. But because they had missed the county FLA, again, it is a qualifying structure, we were unable to. But again, a number of those bands came to Sligo last year and played on the gig rig in Sligo and that. So that, it wasn't a flash in the pan, I suppose is the best way to put it. That relationship is still going, and we're looking to build on it. And if we go prior to 2013, we look at the cabin FLAs. Willie Drennan was down, and a number of bands that came down to the cabin FLA as well. So it has been an ongoing relationship. It's building, and again, we see it as important to opening up. As I said at the start, we're non-political, non-sectarian. So we don't see any lines. We see music, and we welcome everybody to the forum.
And those bands, are they just Derry bands, or are they from other parts of the north?
Well, it's been local band. Well, if you think like Dromore FLA, for the Ulster FLA, we would involve the local bands, because it would be local bands from both sides of the community that we would get involved with. But in Sligo last year, there was all sorts of bands playing.
Yeah.
It wasn't just local to Sligo; they were from all over.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Okay, I mean that's really positive. So. It's about how we include this inquiry. Is about the inclusion of working class communities, and the fact that some working class elements of working class communities have been excluded or felt excluded from the arts. So, I mean, an organisation from yourselves with the work you do is really, really good. But if the funding issue and the lack of instruments is something that adds that exclusion, then what have you done to to demand that you get funding for instruments? Because you said about marching bands get funded for instruments, so why shouldn't other bands? Why should it be limited? Have you challenged that?
Yes, is the short answer to that. We're in continual discussions with the Arts Council as one of their clients about trying to increase our funding from them. I've challenged them a number of times on the bands fund to say that I feel very strongly that it should be opened up to all people. They then point us towards the Take It Away scheme. Again, I suppose that their counter argument to us is that their budget is continually contracting, and that they're trying to stick with the funding that they have available presently. And what the point that we make, I suppose, in relation to the dancing and the singing and the tin whistle is that it's a small amount of money to allow someone from any background to get involved. And again, if a child came to a class, I've given numerous examples of it, where a family will come to a member of the branch and say, I would like my son or daughter to take part, to start learning an instrument. We just can't afford it. The door's never closed. They'll be handed a tin whistle. Someone will have a tin whistle sitting at the house. Someone will have a fiddle. Someone will have an accordion that they're not using currently. It'll be handed to the child, and the child will go. And that's, I suppose, it's not written down. We don't have policies on how we interact with any class in the community, but it is part of our core work, is making sure that everybody has that opportunity, and that's really how we work it within Cultus.
I think as well, just because we are a community-based organisation, now we would be very lucky in that some people would gift us an instrument that maybe they no longer play, or it's been sitting around the house and nobody's playing it, and then we pass that on to somebody who is in need of an instrument that can't afford it.
And is there a limit to the types of instruments, or is it anything? Anything?
Yeah. The young girl from Mumble won the All Ireland on the saxophone race.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's more the tunes that they're playing.
Yes. Okay. Right. Okay, well, thank you. I mean, there's been a lot of very useful information there, and I commend you for the work that you do, and look forward to seeing the flag coming to County Antrim.
Yeah.
Okay, Gurma.
Okay, thanks, Rosie. Oliver was next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. And we have a very strong Cultus Pretoria Iron branch in the Glens, and I know the work you do right through the whole community, and I think it's not a thing of how do you entice people from unions coming into your organisation. Your organisation is actually filled with unionist participation, especially musicians.
Yeah.
From all the traditions. I know that myself, and even people who play in bands, marching bands, actually, some of them actually playing with Cultus. So, but the thing that worries me is the lack of funding that has come to the Cultus Pretoria Iron over the years, and it could be the lack of applications. Just looking through some of the figures here, from 2006-7 to 2009-10, marching bands received 878,000. And that's not including the Arts Council. Arts Council is on top of that again. So I think that the one thing that Cultus has to do here is to look at how they go about funding it. I had a talk with some of them a couple of years ago on this subject. I was quite surprised at their attitude towards it.
I think a lot of that is because it's a volunteer organisation.
Yeah.
The people don't feel that they have the expertise to complete application forms for the Arts Council, and that's why now with the county FLAS, the funding is central from Ulster Council, and Brenton, who is in an ideal place then, and he understands now the forms, that he can work through that and work with the Arts Council to secure that funding, whereas some of the smaller branches, so the volunteers just don't feel that they have the skills to apply for the funding, and they don't know what they're looking for, how to fill in the form, that sort of thing.
Well, see, some of that funding I'm talking there, that actually the money for musical instruments in that same period of time totals so just over $500,000 has been funded.
And you see, as I say, I'm only in post now, really 5-6 years. And up until that, if I can give an example, like our head office in Dublin has 6 staff, and that's the thing. Cultus is all the time running on a very small, tight budget. And again, I think everyone in the room has probably been involved with the community group at some stage, and when they see the amount of bureaucracy, reporting, evaluating that is needed for the application forms at the minute, and red tape that goes, when you're a volunteer for an organisation, it is very hard to actually to go through that. It takes so much time, people are leading so many busy lives, and I think that's been where we are at the minute. Again, at the minute, we're looking to try and improve relations with funders and with the department and with bodies like yourselves, so that people can see the good work that we're doing. But again, in relation to the inquiry, I would say we're not the only organisation in that boat. There are organisations that have been able to get their hands on the money because they have the expertise, because they have the staff. Unfortunately, we just don't have that.
Can I suggest to you that you think about the community networks, because they do the work for groups, and that's a place. But can I congratulate you on the charitable work and the work that you do in communities, because you are a lifeline in communities when there's an event being held. You know, and the last event held at home by the Cultus, he actually had a long bag drum on it. It's quite a bit of a story.
That was a bit of progress, Oliver, wasn't it?
I don't know about that. But it was quite interesting, you know, so well done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, thanks, Oliver.
Thank you.
Okay, Basil, you be a man could pick up a tin whistle, I reckon.
Can I just bring you to, I mean, it was great to hear about all the work that you do, and we'll maybe touch that, but the particular thing about this inquiry is about working class. You know, there's a feeling that maybe in other cultural searches that they're excluded. So would you just have a view on that? You know, is there...
I think Cultus is really classes. We were just talking about this when we were coming up here today, that, you know, so many people through Cultus, I have no idea what they do. I have no idea if they're the richest person in the world or if they're making minimum wage. It's all people from all different backgrounds are involved within Cultus.
So could you give us some
Why?
help and advice as to why
Well,
that might
I
be?
think it's because it's community based. You know, because we're, as Brent said, 75 branches across Ulster, and in rural communities, it's local people working together, and I think that's really why it's.
There is a sort of a contrary thing that sometimes when you bring money into things, that it drives out the community nature of things. You know, that if you have
I
money...
think we'd cope.
Well, if you were talking about the money, I'm going to drift off. I do want to talk in the working class, but just to say, I think the figure you said was £42 million that the FLA brought in. It seems strange to me that an event of that size, even with a cost of 1.5 million, that somehow or other you haven't managed to get more money out of it for yourselves.
Well, that's bringing into the local economy. That's not bringing.
But if you, I mean, I know the impact that it had in the surround. It was not without its difficulties getting it there, but having got it there, I thought it was really successful. But it was really significant. It was probably, would it be right in saying it was probably the flagship event in that year? You know, it was bigger than almost anything else. Bigger than anything else. So I just think that you ought to be able to put a bit more leverage on it. And I'm not being critical. I'm just saying to you that I think you've got crown jewels and people are not helping you enough.
Well, from that side of things, there's a small donation from that goes into head office to help with the working and the organising of the whole organisation from the FLA budget. But it is minimal, and I would agree. But it's the nature of it. If we started taking, for example, the entrance fees to the competitions into Cultus, that would work quite well at All Ireland level. But when you would go back to your county level, where you might have a small FLA with a few hundred people, maybe 1,000 people going to the competitions, that money that comes in on the door is key to actually being able to run it, because we haven't had any funding over the years to actually be able to run that event itself.
Have you? I'm just going to ask, have you ever been to any of the Irish fests in America, you know, the Milwaukee Irish Fest or anything like that?
I haven't either, but no, I know a number of our people have.
I mean, that's where I had my conversion, because I went to the Milwaukee Irish Fest by mistake, and discovered I had a great time. And actually, the thing that really made me laugh was I met half of the Ulster Scots agency out there as well, and there was this bit where people were just picking up different instruments and saying, well, how do you play this and how do you do that? And musicians just naturally wanted to, oh, that's interesting. But I have to tell you, up until I went to that, I wasn't really keen on culture, because I sort of thought it was a bit divisive. So the question, so I turned my mind around, so the question I wonder is, how do you engage with working class, or how would you engage with working class communities from the different traditions? I mean, you can do it obviously at the flat, you know, the national level, but it might be a wee bit off-putting to get people to go along to GAA venues and things locally.
Funny, there's a local branch in County Down, always operated from a GAA, and they felt that same thing. They're coming from a mixed community, that they wanted to invite more people in, so they moved venues and they're now in a community centre. Because for that very reason, that they wanted to encourage more people to join.
I'll finish on this point just as an observation on the bit, but I would just be keen if you would just, you do seem to be really successful at a community level, and I'm interested about how you get people that might not normally be, because culture sometimes sounds like a big C culture. And I suspect that half the people that go to your thing see it as a small C culture or as their culture or something else. I mean, how do you think people look at the activities that they're engaging with you? Do they see it as culture, or do they see it as having a good time?
Probably a mixture. You know, there were some people, I'm from a very big branch, and some people who are involved in it probably see it as I could drop the kids off for a couple of hours here and they're doing something to do with music and I'll pick them up again later, and they don't engage much more than that.
Yeah.
Where other people, they live and breathe the music, the tradition, the culture. So there's a wide range, I'd say, within the organisation.
But if I just said to you, just one sentence, Chair, just to finish. It strikes me that you do have an opportunity to engage with people from different traditions without forcing you down that. And I do think that when you look at the funding, that there is a Minister for Culture, Arts and Leisure, and you might be going above the Arts Council and saying, this is what we contribute to what your aims are. I do think that if you don't force people into things, that if they just get along with it, things happen, and I would just encourage you, and I would support you if I can in any of that.
Thank you.
If I could just say one thing to that. I spoke earlier about in Derry in 2013, Lisa, I'm trying to drastically remember her surname, Anderson, and she was the community engagement officer there for it. And again, it's the sort of thing that it would be within our plans if we were able to get one, to be able to put someone like that, like a community engagement officer there. I think there's brilliant work could be done in that, as you say, in bringing people in, looking at a whole strategy for the organisation to bring everyone together, because it is a very open organisation.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Bob. Right, William, you're next. And
thanks, Chair.
give us a tune.
Can I thank you very much for your time and your presentation. In relation to the inquiry is about connectivity with working class communities, Mr. Gray has identified, and I'm interested. I think there's a difference in a sort of rural and urban context, and I represent an urban constituency. How do you reach out? And I'll touch on who you reach out to in a moment. How do you reach out to the people who actually come to your events? Should there be branch meetings or whatever? And could you tell me what a branch meeting or whatever it is actually entails?
Branch meeting?
Yeah, whatever meetings. What do they entail? What do you do at them?
It depends on the branch now what the meeting will entail. So we'll have a structure within Cultus where we'd have a chair of a branch and a vice chair and a secretary and a treasurer. We've a youth officer, we've a PRO, that sort of thing. And they meet on a regular basis to discuss whatever issues are particular to that branch.
So they meet as an executive? Is that right?
Well, it's not, sort of. So again, it depends on the branch. We would invite all our members to branch meetings. We usually just get the executive, but we would invite all members into it, and we'd talk about events that are coming up. We talk about classes. We talk about how we're going to promote a particular instrument, or if we feel that we need more expertise, we have pipers, and we have somebody comes in once a month to help with them. So we just talk about all those types of things.
Okay. And I have to apologise because a colleague called me out about an urgent issue there, so I missed part of your presentation. So when you meet, it's instruments, is it the Irish language, poetry, that sort of thing?
It's anything. It's music, song, dance, and language are four main areas.
The Irish
of
tradition.
Yeah.
Okay. So, in terms of reaching out and connecting and getting those people to come in, whether to your branch to join or to come to your events, how do you do that?
I suppose there would be articles put into the newspapers. You try and get as much coverage as you can, posters in the local shops, in the local community buildings.
Social
media. Maybe not all branches would have a website, but if they did have a website, they'd be putting it out, text messaging out to people that have registered previously. And then again, as I would say, a lot of our committee members or people within the branch would be they're all part of the local community. So they would be involved in other areas. They might be involved in local schools, within local churches, within different organisations that exist within areas.
Yeah. Okay, so because there's a difference. I mean, I'm a member of the Orange Order, so there's a difference in the Orange Order in the city and rural areas in terms of the makeup of the membership. In the city, it will be much more working class. In the country, it will be across the classless. Would it be the same in context of your organisation?
Possibly.
Possibly, quite possibly. But again, at the same time, going into the likes of our main urban areas that we would be in, you know, Derry and Belfast and that there. Where I'm from, I'm Dromore myself, and if I look at Omagh, which is a decent sized town, when I look at the membership of the branch in there, there would be a good mix, you know, of people in that there. There's a number of people who would be quite wealthy in it, but there would be number of other people that are would be classed within the working class or the working poor, you know, within it.
Well, can I ask, we had Mr. Bobby Foster, who came to us from a cultural group in Shankill. One of the points he made was that the people who involved in the cultural work that he does, and when he gave evidence to us, would suggest, and I have to say I happen to agree with him, that when they come along to events in the, you know, his area and in his group, they don't necessarily see the cultural activity in which they're involved as the arts, but as culture. That doesn't mean any less artistic.
Yes.
They see it as culture. Would you agree with that?
Definitely. There's no clear line from where does culture end and arts begin. I think it's completely blurred between the two, you know.
Yeah, and I think for many people in the working classes, the term arts becomes a barrier. Because it becomes they see it as elitist.
Yeah.
Yes.
And potentially more, probably in practice, more expensive.
Yeah, and I would agree. And again, it's back to the sort of the formal arts centres and buildings that we have, and they're brilliant to have that that infrastructure there. But they can also often be an intimidating environment for someone who's not used to engaging with the arts, because their class is an arts centre. They may be doing several things that, in a dictionary definition, is arts. They may see them as culture. They may see them as something completely different.
Which is exactly, I think, more or less what the people from the Lodge were saying as well.
Yeah.
And so, can I then ask you, just in terms of funding for, it's been talked about here much about funding for marching bands. I should point out the funding for marching bands is extremely limited funding. And nowhere near the potential and the demand that there would be for it. But I have no difficulty with it being expanded to musicians or bands other than marching or parading bands. Because I think Mr. Anderson, my colleague, raised the issue of Lambeg drumming clubs, for example, can't get funding either because they're not deemed as marching bands.
Yeah.
You certainly wouldn't march behind a Lambeg drum. And you certainly wouldn't be marching if you were playing it. But so I have sympathy with that point. But can I ask you then, in terms of your funding, Brendan, you're the only member of staff in Northern Ireland. How is your organisation funded?
Poorly. The organisation itself, there is a small revenue, well, a reasonable revenue grant received from the government in the south, but when you put that out across a worldwide organisation, it's small. But outside of that sort of government funding, we have a membership fee structure. And again, if I give the example, I don't have the exact figures here.
£4 for children, £3 for seniors, £14 for a family.
Yeah, and you know, of the £14 for a family, £2 will be retained within the local branch, and it goes then to the county board, who will retain, I think it's sort of like a £1.70, send it on to the Ulster Council, and it's split that way so that each element of the triangle has some sort of portion of funding.
Okay. In terms of instruments, Gráinne, you mentioned that you're learning the concertina or were, and you got it for £20 for a year. That's a very good deal.
Yeah.
The instrument itself costs £1,000. There's obviously no way that some people, particularly from working class community, can obviously buy that instrument. And so your branch buys an instrument and then they rent it to you for 20 quid. It takes them 50 years to make up that money. So where do they get the money to pay for the instruments?
Well, luckily, the instruments probably that we buy aren't the £1,000 instruments. You know, the concertina that I would buy wouldn't be the same as it would be better quality than the concertina that I would be renting. So you're talking about those concertinas being £200. So yes, it does take a while to recoup the costs in that, but I think it's something we're prepared to take. We'll do fundraising to get the money for the instruments, and as I say, sometimes we're gifted an instrument as well, which we can either sell on or hire out.
A lot of a lot of the branches there, they may want to, if they wanted to try and buy some instruments, like my own branch, they would do maybe a Christmas concert where the kids that are learning, and they might get one or two of the, what do we class as the experts, musicians, to come along. They'll do a Christmas concert. It might be £5, £10 in for the family members, and each child might get one or two tickets with the hope that the child will be there, mum will be there, and maybe dad will be paying. That sort of way to try and get them through the door. And that money then would be then put back into either lessons or buying instruments.
And finally, can I ask you, in terms of, when you said there's no official link with the GAA, it's unofficial, I mean, what does that mean?
Well, because there's such a crossover between membership, a lot of our members play sports as well as play instruments, and also we're working in the same communities, so there'd be sort of an informal, if they want to put on a concert, they'll come and talk to Cultus to say, is there any chance you could have some musicians over for this event? Or, as you were saying, sometimes we have, we use the GAA facilities and things like that there, but there's...
Again, another one, just for example, like the Ulster Flag again that was held in Dromore, because of the funding that the GAA has been getting over the last number of years, we were able to go to the GAA. We'd looked at doing the World Host training and stuff, and steward training and everything for the volunteers within the community. And we went to the GAA. We were trying to gather the money to do the training. They were able to say, well, no, we have 30 people trained, and they'll come and help. And again, it's that community ethos that they come in. There was no cost. It didn't cost the branch anything, and they were able to provide stewards and for junctions and things like that.
And I know you touched on it with Mr. McRae, but potentially in some areas, if you're going to reach out and trying to get the unionist community to come on board, meeting in GAA Hall will be an impediment to...
I suppose really the main reason behind that would be lack of other community facilities in an area. The GAA club may be the best building in the town or in the area to hold instrument classes, because I know, and again, I'm talking from personal experience, we would have our meetings in the likes of the Credit Union building in the middle of the town, but they've only 2 rooms, so if you want to do music classes, it's not available for it. We actually use the local high school for ours, and a lot of branches would use the high schools. But again, because of the restrictions now within the Department of Education, the cost that they look for you to hire the building, because the caretaker must be there, and that
Thanks very much.
can be restricted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Will. Nelson is next.
Thank you, and apologies for not being here for the presentation. In terms of just taking Belfast as an example of an urban area, how many branches would you have in Belfast?
2.
2. Where would they be?
Lochley's kind of West Belfast.
Yeah, and then Belfast branch itself, I think it's Antrim Road.
Yeah.
Is the area.
Where do they meet on the Antrim Road?
There's a church there. Now, as I say, the
Okay.
only
Oh,
time
yes.
that I've been...
It'll be 174 Trust building, the old
could be.
Duncan Presbyterian Church, probably.
Quite possibly.
on the
I
It's at the top of the
found it on a sat nav.
It's at the top of the New Lodge Road, that one.
Right.
I think that's probably where it would. Okay. And how many members would be in each of those branches? I'm just trying to get a sense of the scale in an urban area.
Lochley's quite a big branch.
Knockley would be a big branch. The Belfast branch itself would be an older branch, it's a much older sort of demographic within membership.
Yes.
And again, they wouldn't have as many. I don't think they do classes, but a lot of they would help with local community groups that are running classes. And Lochley would have a big membership and would have big class. I think there could be.
Well, I know that they have groups and bands competing at all 4 age groups.
Yeah, and you're talking
20,
20 30 people for each
and that's
band.
just in the band, so there'd be more, there'd be parents and so a couple of hundred people in
A couple
Lochley.
hundred people together in
Yeah.
West Belfast, and maybe 30 or something.
Yeah, probably
that'd be
about
fair, I
that.
agree, yeah.
So you're talking across the city about 250 at them, thereabouts. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much, Nelson. think that concludes your presentation. Sorry, there's one issue here I just deal with first. Ben, you mentioned about independent survey done on the impact of the All-Ireland Fleadh and Londonderry 2013. Can we get a copy of that? Can you send
That's
a
not a
copy,
problem. I
please?
actually have about a dozen of them in the car, but it was carrying them up was the, the problem.
Up that hill is not easy.
I can either send it an electronic copy or on hard copy.
Cahill, did you want to come
Yeah,
in?
Chair,
Reflect.
just congratulate CODIS there on, I see they've been awarded the European Citizens Prize,
Yes.
which is given to citizens organisations having contributed to promoting better mutual understanding and closer integration between citizens of the member states. So it's quite a prestigious one, and I think again it's been presented
Saturday morning.
in Tipperary, and you were nominated by a number of colleagues of mine.
Co-gorgeous.
So gorgeous.
Thank you.
Very
Okay. Brendan Grania, thanks very much for your presentation. Very informative. Hopefully that you'll get something from it, and we certainly, I think, have enjoyed it and learned quite a bit about your organisation. So thanks very much for coming along today and taking the time to put forward your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very
Thank
much.
you very much. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Okay, Chair, I will now hand over formally to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
I don't mind.
Bands can do fundraising and give it to charity.
The tech.
Well,
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Valerie and William and Cody, for coming along this morning. You're aware of the remit of the discussion, which is around arts and their relationship to and the inclusion in the arts of working class communities. So thank you for coming, and if you'd like to proceed with your presentation.
Thank you very much for inviting us. We're delighted to be here to be able to give this briefing and also the written submission that we have submitted previously. My name is Valerie Quinn. I am the chairperson of the Confederation of Ulster Bands, and I am joined here by Cody Murray, who's the secretary, and by William Bradshaw, who's a member of the committee. What we'd like to do here is actually give a little bit of background into the Confederation of Marching Bands, but then focus mainly on the sector itself. For those, we're very aware that there is a lot of misperceptions and misunderstandings with relation to the marching bands, particularly if you're not directly involved. So what we'd like to do is try and enlighten a little bit in that. The Confederation of Marching Bands were formed in 2009 and it's a completely voluntary body, as is the entire sector, with relation to trying to represent the marching bands. Marching bands themselves are completely autonomous. Every band is completely separate. There's no overarching body, with the exception of the Confederation of Ulster Bands. So we represent all of those bandsmen out there. There are 17 local band forums who represent their own local areas. And each of those have representatives sitting on the committee. So William, for example, is a representative of the Armagh Bands Forum, and Cody is a representative of the North Antrim Bands Forum. So we have all sectors of the province sort of represented here today. Marching bands themselves are quite misunderstood, and I'd be quite honest and say that if I said to any member of a marching band, do you consider yourself part of the arts community, they would say no. And it's very interesting from reading your research that actually when I was looking at this specific list of art forms included by the NISRA, that they also don't include marching bands. And if we could take the whole contentious or disputed or perceived issues with marching bands out of the equation completely. And let's just look at this completely neutrally, I think is probably the best way to go. We have here a body of approximately 30,000 people who are week in, week out, sometimes twice a week, performing music to a very high standard and very high level. We have within the community, we have Irish champions, we have Ulster champions, we have British champions, and we also have world champions, all unrecognised generally by the wider community here in Northern Ireland. When they compete in world stages, it is known without dispute that they are among the best in the world. At recent pipe band championships, the World Championships held in Glasgow, over half of the prizes across that entire sector come back home to Northern Ireland. So there is no doubt of the high level of musicianship within the sector. And that is really just the membership themselves. When you then look at the spectators involved within the sector, for any event, reading through some of the other submissions and some of the other briefings that you received, I noticed that some of the other contributors were very delighted to actually receive 80,000 spectators to their events over an entire year. I can quite easily give examples of events held by the sector where there are approximately 3,000 performers at one event and over 10,000 spectators at one event. And I could give you 5, 6 different examples of that there, ranging across the province from Markethill to Ballymoney, Clough-Mills, Londonderry, and those are just off the top of my head, just scribbled down before we came in here. So the numbers involved are actually astronomical. And I think it's quite easy to say that we would be the largest single arts sector which is entirely voluntary, and it would be very hard to actually dispute those. Now, taking apart from the most well-known area that we are involved in, which is the parades, there are approximately, and there is something like 2,500 parades and events every year of this nature. And every marching band takes part in approximately 70 to 80 types of these a year. So if you consider this as a voluntary sector, completely voluntary, that means that every person is making their own expenditure on travelling to these events, participating in these events. Cody is going to go through in a moment the way the funding is run for these events, both voluntary and from funding from other agencies. But it is a very, very large dedication from the part of the performers themselves. Taking aside the parades and the street activity, every year there are approximately 150 to 200 what we call indoor events which take part across the province. And I was very interested to note in the research the list of venues that are considered arts venues throughout the province. So you have, for instance, the Ulster Hall, the Braid Arts Centre in Ballymena, the Island Arts Centre Lisburn, Riverside Theatre Coleraine, Waterfront Hall Belfast, Roe Valley Arts Centre, Ards Arts Centre, Carrickfergus Town Hall, Theatre at the Mill, Burnavon, Clotworthy, Old Courthouse. I could go through all of those, and I can quite easily identify at every single one of those an event which has been held by a band. These are held obviously indoors. There is no restriction, as it is with marching parades. There is no restriction on spectator attendance. Anyone can go along to any of the events, and they will find a performance of the highest calibre. I have been to many, many events where I recently watched the Christmas parade in London, where they had marching bands over from America, and I can safely say that the standards that would be on display at any of these events are of a higher calibre than what was evidenced in London. The repertoire that the bands play themselves, it's constantly changing. Each band must know a minimum of 30 to 40 tunes throughout the year, and it changes every year, so it's constantly refreshing. And these pieces range from traditional Irish, Scottish, historical, through pop tunes, jazz, Mozart, classic, gospel. You really would be hard pushed to put a finger on any area of the musical repertoire that they don't touch on. With regards to the actual social benefits that bands themselves bring, they are proven to have a large effect on the mental health of their participants. Even for spectators, it's a reduction of the loneliness and improves the levels of community cohesion by even just attending these events. What we tend to be very much surprised with, we hold every year an event in the Ulster Hall, the Festival of Marching Bands, in association with the newsletter. Some of you may have attended that there. And we ourselves were surprised that the audience we were expecting, the first year we ran it, we were expecting it to be members of the banding community, but it wasn't. Of the 1,000 in attendance, approximately 80% of them were of the senior community, 60 and above, which we were actually surprised at ourselves. And it's actually, if you attend any marching event, you will be interested in both the range of the spectators, from the very old to the very young, and also the performers as well. Bands are also probably the only art form where you can have an 80-year-old gentleman performing along with a 4-year-old child. And there is no restriction to age, gender. It's very disability friendly. We have many bands where they have members in I hope I'm not saying this the wrong way, in wheelchairs and incapacitated in any way. It's also racially inclusive. We do have members from other communities as well as the white sector. It is also very involved in the community with the work that it does. For instance, a band from East Belfast there this Christmas presented gifts and Christmas cards back to all the pensioners in their area. So they were very inclusive. And some anecdotal evidence that we have from even just spectators or even members and participants is that sometimes, especially in rural communities, the band is the only form of socialisation that they may have. And sometimes for the elderly, attending a band parade or attending a band event is their only, during the week, it's their only communication and comings and goings with any other people, really. They're living on their own the whole week, and this is their chance to get to meet other people. So there is vast mental health benefits to it as well. The one thing that we have discovered is that they're being involved in the arts itself through music making also increases motivation and further interest in other areas of the arts. And we have many examples of that. For instance, dramas, the Pride play by Blue Eagle Productions was specially commissioned up in Londonderry, and that combined professional actors and members of the band community performing for the first time. And that performed as part of, it did a province-wide run, and it also was part of the City of Culture up there. As well as that, 3 bands from Londonderry worked exclusively with composers Brian Irvine and Sid Peacock to create a new performance for the Music City Day up in the City of Culture. It's not really exclusive to music making, the ways that the bands liaise and work with their community. William's going to go into that a little bit more, but bands really, like some bands have education and careers advisors to advise their youth. I've mentioned already about an example of a band working very closely with their seniors in the community. There's a social commitment. Bands themselves take it upon themselves to clean up their local areas, their river banks, etc., and will actually do exercises that there. Again, all voluntary. There's a great, obviously, physical element to it for not only the participants, but when people decide that they really don't want to be in a marching band any longer, they're still involved in the community and can get involved in a capacity of organising committees, marshalling groups, etc., to assist with the actual active band. We also have quite a great deal of evidence which portrays how bands can re-engage young people who have become disaffected and disengaged at school. There is high levels of enjoyment, increasing of the interpersonal skills and relationship development, increased awareness of their cultural and moral responsibilities, and a reduction in the pull towards the antisocial behaviour among the young people. And what William will stress again is that marching band participants, approximately 60 to 50% of those are actually under 20, male, and obviously the majority of them are Protestant, which is the single hardest demographic to engage with for statutory bodies. In general terms, I think we could safely say that the marching band sector exists very much on its own and is very self-sufficient, very self-motivating and very self-sustainable, with minimal interaction, I have to say, from the arts sectors generally or the Arts Council in any form other than the statutory funding, which Cody is going to talk about. So, with that all said, I think I'll hand over to Cody, who will talk about the financial and economic elements of the sector.
Okay, good morning. As Valerie's already mentioned, we believe the band movement is the single largest arts sector in Northern Ireland, and as such you could extrapolate that funding to this traditional musical sector would be large based on the number of participants, but unfortunately that's not actually the case whenever you look at it. There's only two main funding streams open to bands, that of the Arts Council of Northern Ireland Musical Instruments Scheme and the Ulster Scots Agency Music and Dance Scheme. And of those two, only one of them is solely directed towards bands. When we consider that the band movement addresses many of the key government commitments in relation to accessibility of the arts to the working class communities, and making a meaningful contribution to the social income or social inclusion within such communities, it appears that that funding to the sector doesn't match up with what's actually being achieved by the band movement. DSD figures produced, and I think there was a copy given there, in their report on traditional Protestant parading sector in Northern Ireland by RSM McClure Waters, highlighted a social capital impact of 19.3 million per year by bands, and an economic impact within Northern Ireland of 8.26 million. Funding from government sources of the two schemes which I mentioned previous has a potential pot of only 400,000. The Arts Council of Northern Ireland Musical Instruments Scheme has a potential pot in there of 200,000, set aside specifically for bands, with the possibility of 5,000 available per band. So roughly in any given year, 40 bands can benefit. However, with an exclusion of 7 years between being eligible for funding, this rolls out over 40% of bands from the scheme each year. No other funding scheme within the Arts Council of Northern Ireland has such a long exclusion criteria, and bands cannot access other funding schemes within the Arts Council because they're reminded of this scheme. Also, let's look at that 200,000 that is set aside for bands. Most of you will probably know of the 13p campaign. That was looking at how much is given to the arts sector per week. It costs everybody 13 pence. But if you put that in perspective from a band's point of view, only 0.2 pence per week, or it takes 5 weeks basically to give 1 pence towards a band. Yet the Arts Council recognise the band movement and that scheme as one of their most diverse schemes, with uptake across the province and often within communities which they find hard to reach for arts activities. We also know in the past that the organisation has tried to axe that scheme, where we as a group believe what they should be doing is trying to increase the engagement with working class communities, and as such increase that funding pot. Musical instruments such as accordions or pipes can cost up to 200 or 2,500 per instrument. So really what you're buying there is 2 instruments for every 7 years. So when you put that in perspective, that's really, from a band's point of view, that doesn't suffice for a band. To encourage and engage participants within the working class community, more equipment needs to be purchased and needs to be available, because most working class people just cannot afford that sort of money to pay for the instruments. The other main potential funding source for bands is the Ulster Scots Music and Dance Scheme, again with a potential pot this year of 200,000. The scheme is open to every community group, not just the band movement. A specific amount within that is ring-fenced for dance, with the remaining available for music tuition. This year the agency is funding 108 groups within the scheme, and of those 50 are bands. So you can do the maths and it works out to be roughly 100,000 is being given to bands. This fund allows the groups to provide music tutors to teach students, and also helps cover music exam fees associated with the instrument being learnt. Both schemes are always oversubscribed, with demand always outstripping available funds. So if you combine those two schemes to the overall figure, figure, it equates to this year around 300,000, which is being given to the largest traditional arts sector in Northern Ireland. And if you also take the DSD figures, there's a combined figure of benefit to the community of 27.56 million. That means there is a return on the government investment. For every £1 given to the band sector, we generate an additional 91.86p, a figure we believe no other traditional arts sector is able to achieve, especially as near enough all our members come from the working class communities.
Okay. William's also going to talk about the membership of the marching bands, where we sort of like get our membership and sort of like the areas that cover.
Morning. Just to bring this particular part of our report to a conclusion, just to who are these people that are in bands? Where do they come from? By and large, the membership of bands across Northern Ireland, the greater majority of the membership would actually be under the age of 35. And figures like 30% of the males that are in bands, 37% of females that are in bands are actually under the age of 20. So in contrast to many youth organisations and churches who would report falling attendances of youth, bands are actually increasing year on year their membership in a very important demographic, i.e. that among the youth. And in terms of profession and background to those members that are in the bands, yes, the bands would encompass a wide variation of employability and career background, both from professional status. We have doctors, solicitors, members. However, predominantly, a lot of the membership would come from what we class working class background and rural background. And within that, there would be clear division sort of between those bands which would feature predominantly male members from urban areas, inner city areas, and those from a more family-orientated background from rural areas, where we would have 2, 3 generations of the same family would make up the core and the background of the band membership. Hence, the ability for maybe an 80-year-old to be sitting with his grandchild in the same band. To say there'll be a lot of strong family and community links within bands. The younger people would look to the older people for peer leadership. A lot of other activities associated with band membership, aside from the high quality of musicianship which is developed with the young people, and that in turn is promotes sustainability of many bands, because as those young people were young people 20, 30 years ago, they are actually now the leaders, the teachers and the mentors for the next generation. So there's a lot of inherited skills, a lot of transferable skills, aside from learning music, because we now do a lot of work, training and outreach work with things like drug and alcohol awareness, enhancing employability skills through teamwork, team building, confidence building, public speaking, and a lot of other things to do with compliance with legal issues sort of around the charity legislation that's ongoing, vulnerable adults, child protection strategies, financial policies. A lot of that training goes on as well. The terms of musicianship for the band members say this isn't, as sometimes portrayed in the media, it just happens during the perceived marching season. Bands are actually 12 months of the year, 52 weeks of the year, twice a week for practices, never mind the public performances, both indoor concerts, outdoor contests, and the parades that they in turn host and attend themselves. There would, I would say, without contradiction, be no perception or no connection with band membership as actually being part of the arts sector. They do not see that the arts sector is something that they can entirely relate to. They can see the religious and they can see the cultural connections, but no perception as to the wider arts movement. And that in turn, unfortunately, is reflected by the lack of engagement then from some of the major arts bodies in understanding and dealing with or even communicating the context or the relevance of the music that they perform in the wider arts sector. To say, I think that covers most of what I'd want to say at this area.
Yeah, just to finalise for everyone, I think it's very important that that we as a movement, and also yourselves as a committee, consider the marching bands rather than any of the other perceptions or misconceptions with regards to the sector. Consider it as an art form, and a musical making art form at that, and a very large and totally voluntary art form. There are no paid workers within this sector at any level. There are no paid members. There are no personal or gains in any way, either financial or otherwise. And I think it's fair to say it is widely gone unrecognised at every level, barred by the membership itself. So thank you for allowing us to be here today to say this all.
Thank you. The first question from David Hilditch.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the presentation and the comprehensive report that is before us. Probably should declare an interest as patron of Sir Henry Ingleby's Fife and Drum Band and Vice President of the Carrick White House and Agnes Street Brass Band. In the indoor events, that's a fairly new concept in recent years, and I know from the usage of Carrickfergus Town Hall, for instance, we don't get a great opportunity there for touring exhibitions or arts form, and really the bands have filled the void there over the course of 12 months. But it really does take the whole sector now into a 12-month a year, period rather than what used to be called the marching season. That's a big strain on commitment as volunteers. You want to say something just further about that?
Absolutely. Being involved in the whole sector is a very intensive and very dedicated area. To be honest, the indoor sector isn't anything new to members of the community. I've been involved with marching bands for approximately 25 to 30 years, and I've always been aware of it and involved in it. However, I think what the sort of the wider recognition is coming about now, because of the fact that we are trying to emphasise the fact that this just isn't a one day a year or a several months a year hobby. This is something that is a very integral part of people's lives. Some office bearers within these groups have compared this to being a full-time job, because it is so intensive and does take up so much of your time. If you consider that a band member, and just a normal band member of any band, rural or urban, you're practising one night a week, every week of the year, with the exception of perhaps 2 weeks off at Christmas. You're allowed 2 weeks. On top of that, if you're practising, for instance, a contest, so I know several bands who are practising for contests actually in Carrickfergus, which is happening at the end of February, you're practising 2 nights a week. During the months from September to March, you're usually performing another 1 night a week at an event that you've been asked to. And obviously, the more musically proficient you are, the more events you're asked to. So some bands that I can think of and that I was a former member of are perhaps out at least 1 night every week performing. So that's 3 nights every week already. Whenever you then go from the months of approximately March to September, that is when the outdoor events take place. And by outdoor events, I'm not just talking about parades on the road. They also take part in festivals. They take part in Lord Mayor's parades in the rural areas particularly. They take part in council events down in the North Coast. They take part in the Milk Cup parades. So it's not just marching bands events. And what I do have to stress here is marching bands themselves are separate from the Loyal Order organisations. And while there are approximately 1,000 Loyal Order parades throughout the year, which bands are obviously an integral part of, there are approximately 2,000 parades per year, which marching bands totally organise and run themselves. And if you consider the event management that there incorporates, and the onus that incorporates on what are essentially volunteers doing this outside of their normal day-to-day stuff, that is a massive commitment. Again, something which they themselves don't recognise until they step back from it, because it's what they've always done, what they've always been involved in, and what they love to do. And that's why they feel very, very much about, they're very protective of it all, because they are so heavily involved in this and so dedicated to it. And again, all voluntary.
And additional to that as well, you've mentioned about the cost of uniforms and potentially transport and such things. But the uniforms are such high quality and standard and stand out and actually add to the spectacle of events. Again, that must be out of pocket to the participants, or is that?
It certainly is. Cody has already mentioned the official funding. You can see from the social and economic impact report that I sent down just exactly how much the sector does spend on uniforms themselves. And if I can give you just some examples, I can quote quite easily. Cody's band here are currently in the process of buying new uniforms for the year, and that's approximately 20,000 just for that band. A very plain tunic and jackets, nothing exorbitant. I can think of other bands who have spent in the region of 40,000 per uniforms. Uniforms are completely excluded from any of the funding schemes which are available. So they are only available for instruments, and as Cody said, you're possibly talking about maybe 2 instruments every 7 years. And the other one is tuition, where you can bring in outside tuitioners. So you're talking maybe 40,000, and bands are very, very particular and meticulous about the care of those uniforms. So they would be very, very conscious, and they're renewing those every 3 to 4 years. So that's the amount of outlay that each individual band makes. That money comes entirely from band members and their local community. They will have fundraised extensively in order to raise that amount of money. And it is, as I said before, it is all self-sustaining. The instruments themselves, the funding goes to cover, yes, the initial purchase of those. But when you consider that those instruments get an awful lot of wear and tear throughout the year, there's very high maintenance costs, which is also reflected in the DSD study. And again, those are all self-funded within the sector. So there is a very high financial input from those members, in addition to the small amount of funding that they get. Because if you consider there's a £5,000 limit to each band every 7 years.
George, just one more, yes. William, you mentioned about the arts body and the connections. Now, I tried to draw maybe a coldness on it prior to you coming in relation to it, and I think it was really diplomatic. But you did mention the difficulty, moving to the inquiry itself, the difficulties with the arts bodies and the connections.
I would sort of wear 2 hats, because as well I've been quite heavily involved in the band sector. I'm also involved in quite a lot of grassroots community activity as well. And whereas community groups that are around the province have run sort of arts activities, engaged with the Arts Council, Community Arts Forum and different bodies around, secured small amounts of money for arts projects, be it where they're doing craft works, paintings, murals, mosaics, things like that. There is no enthusiasm or appetite or understanding amongst band members per se to recognise that their musicianship, how the quality it is, what they do, the pageantry, the pride in putting the uniform on, what they look after and their instrument, is part of that perceived arts sector. And some of that could be sort of as a result of conditioning over the years as to how the bands movement has been misportrayed or misperceived, and therefore a barrier has been set up to engagement. But also some of the, with the greatest respect, some of the major players in the arts sector tend to be based in one locality, and I would say geographically at the moment that's about where we're sitting in Belfast. That really, as you go farther west in the province, it falls away to nothing. Now, yes, up certainly in the Maiden City, up in Londonderry, there are engagement with various projects up there, but there are large swathes of the rural area, agriculture, working class, commuter area where people are going from the rural areas to work in wherever their employment takes them. They don't have that engagement, nor is there that outreach or connection from those staff members, those who are in both statutory and also the voluntary community arts bodies, of coming out to meet with or discuss issues and barriers with any recognised band.
Okay, thank you.
I think one of the things that, to reverse what William says, is that, yes, the band members don't recognise themselves as part of the arts sector, but there's very much I dread to say a reluctance, I just can't think of another word at the moment, but there's no engagement from the arts sector towards the movement. It doesn't mention them on their website. When they're having an event to showcase Northern Ireland, they're not involved. When you think of the large number of events that they bring various ethnic groupings and musical groupings in, they don't include marching bands. So there is a reluctance, or perhaps an oversight on behalf of the arts bodies to include, perhaps it's a sensitivity. I don't know the reasoning, but there is not that engagement coming out from the Arts Council towards the sector in the same way it would be to various other groups that bands freely work with day in, day out, African drumming groups and so on. I can think of one band at the moment here who are doing a project with an African drumming group, and they are very, very much included and welcomed by the arts community, whereas the band who's currently working with them wouldn't be.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Karen McKevitt.
Yep, thanks very much. And I suppose I want to start off by paying tribute to a local band in my own area who you probably wouldn't have heard of, but we do great cross-community work together, and that's the Common Silver Band, who come along every Christmas, our annual event, turning on our local Christmas tree. The band have an opportunity to play in their local townland, which is very, very important to the community, because for years they weren't able to. So doors have opened a lot with marching bands. But I suppose Altnavay House in Newry is listed as the Grand Lodge headquarters, etc., and the bands. And I suppose I would see a lot of band events, as you describe them. And I just want to know what community engagements happen before a massive band event comes into an area where maybe doors mightn't be as open.
Could just say, one of the things here, I think, is that our focus is really on, and it's an issue that arose earlier when we were talking about the folks from Cultureland, when they went in. We got into a sort of diverse direction about the question of the Irish language and a whole range of issues. So can we keep the focus very much on what can be done with these art forms to engage working class communities? But I'm just flagging the point up. Okay.
My question still stands.
Okay, I can answer that very, very simply. I don't think Christmas carols, to use your own example, are exclusive to any sector of the community. No. The repertoire that bands play, I've already listed: jazz, gospel music, pop tunes, Mozart, both Irish and Scottish traditional music are all involved in the repertoire of bands. Bands themselves don't speak. Bands themselves don't sing. They don't have any words bar their music. So bands' main method of communicating at any performance is their music. And I think it's quite safe to say that music is without boundaries and without borders and without difference is probably the way I would say it. So bands themselves, I could safely recommend any indoor event, any concert where you could go to and see a full repertoire of music, from classics to modern to obscure jazz. Okay. And I think that's probably the best way to look at the sector, is rather than all the surrounding elements, which bands themselves are not responsible for. Bands play music. Is the bottom line.
Okay. So how would you try and encourage the community that's around maybe the main hall, you know, that the bands would be in, to come and listen and observe the music that's produced?
Bands very frequently hold open nights in their local communities where their doors are open to anyone of the local community to come along to listen. Members of all communities are welcome to any events. There is no one standing to say, I don't like the colour of your shoes, you can't come to this event. That's not the way it is. We're trying to entertain, is the bottom line. That in itself really doesn't... The one area that they are trying to very much develop is, obviously, they're providing free music tuition. So one of the areas that we're trying to look at and develop and work more, and this maybe answers your question, is that we're very aware that education boards are very fund reduced, and one of the areas that we can very much work with is the tutors within the sector are very experienced, and there is a great deal of musicianship and knowledge within that sector. And what we are looking towards is perhaps offering those services to education boards. And we do know of many bands who have gone into local schools and offered their services in regards to 6-week courses, for instance, on the BFAT foot. The BFAT foot itself is a very neutral instrument. It's involved very much in Irish traditional music, as well as Scottish traditional music, and just across the sector. We have actually gone to the extent of the Ulster Scots Community Network has actually now established an OCN Level 2 qualification in B-flat foot. So what we are trying to develop is, and currently are developing in various areas of the country, is that tutors from these marching bands can go into schools and teach the children to play an instrument that is actually encouraging to them to continue that music making, much more so than the recorder would be.
Okay. The reason why, Chair, I did point out at Levay House that it is a good cross-community building, which is very much respected within our area. Thanks very much.
These two are great burns tonight.
Maybe I could add, sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I could just add something to that. Sometimes the context of where bands perform at is open to as to who the audience goes to see them, because a band can be seen to take part in the band parade and adjudged to be only open to one or other section of the community. Yet I can name several bands from my own area. Banbridge District Council hosts a well-known Sunday bandstand in the parks schedule for a number of the local bands, both from the Armagh area and from Over Banbridge, all take part in playing the bandstand in the gardens in Scarva. One of my old friends plays on an accordion band in Armagh. They come down here to Lady Dickson Park, play at the concert on Sunday and that there. They can be openly watched and their musicianship appreciated down there. But sometimes when they're taken out of that context, placed somewhere else, people's perceptions then adjudge who can go to see them, when in fact it is open. And just on another point there raised in relation to schools, there is somewhat of a slight embarrassment in many schools to actually make use of the young, trained musicians they have. There are several schools that are sitting on a wealth of talent and could actually organise relatively quickly a good high-quality orchestra from already trained musicians, yet quite a lot of them prefer to turn around and teach the recorder or percussion instruments at the avoidance of other instruments.
Thank you. Cathal Hushin.
Chair, I wouldn't claim to be any expert in the subject, but I do recognise the work of some of the bands that I would be aware of, including the likes of, well, obviously, Field March in Montgomery, which is one that takes part in quite a number of cross-community festivals. And indeed, during my time in local government, my time as mayor, was driving the Back to the Future car. I led the Ardnara Flute Band around my own town, and they also go to Westport every year for St Patrick's Day, I might say. So I'm aware of some of the work that goes on. And that being said, the elephant in the room is still that many bands and many bands that members of the band form are viewed as contentious, and that's the circumstances in which they are. And whether you're right, it's maybe part of how they're perceived and whatever, and that's, I'll take that on board. I just wonder, like, is there any way that you have or have been addressing some of that contentious nature? You know, be that the parades that are, those small number of parades that are questionable, or indeed those small number of bands. Chair, just it's about the whole engagement issue.
I appreciate that, but the focus of the inquiry.
Okay,
very
could
much.
I wait it out then further then, Chair? Sure. Valerie, you mentioned something called the white sector. I'm not sure what that is. I'm just saying, how many of these bands now, because they're getting public funding, how many of them would be Section 75 compliant, say? Section 75, many would be inclusive of
anybody
right
that
across
gets
the
funding,
community, including working
Could
class.
I also the point, we're not here to cause an investigation into the Equality Commission. Otherwise, a certain organisation that requires all its members to sign up to an aspiration for a United Ireland wouldn't get a penny. And I think I know the organisation, and you know the organisation I'm talking about. So, if you have any other questions,
Can I just
well,
answer
okay,
that?
if you want to make a point, yes.
I can
I'm not
say...
allowed to ask the question, Chair.
Well, questions should be around the issue, but Valerie's kindly
We're
agreed
we're quite happy to answer that. I can say that categorically that any of the bands who currently receive public funding as part of their commitment to that there are all Section 75 compliant.
Okay. Next question then from William Humphrey.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Make a point, Chair, just to very that many bands are not contentious and do not take part in contentious parades. It's just nonsense. Can I just say, in terms of the strategic plan that we have in front of us, I very much welcome that. I think that's a very positive development and shows the professionalism that there is within your sector. I also think in terms of the Ground Load Socio-Economic Impact, which is a very good publication, I do think, however, it's a bit conservative, given some of the figures that John's talking about. I think it's way short of the reality. And I know that many of your bands take part, you mentioned various shows across Northern Ireland, but I know a number of leading bands in Northern Ireland, and one of them, and I recognise a few faces not so long ago on a Saturday morning watching it, taking part in parades in London, including a Lord Mayor's show on a regular basis from Northern Ireland. So I am struck with the point that William mentioned and that you've also developed, Valerie, because it's similar to what we heard from the Comultus groups that were represented. Basically, this idea that people involved in the band sector see themselves as being involved in cultural activity, but not the arts. And I think that's the key and the hub of all of this, in terms of this work that we're doing. That's why I proposed that it should be done in the first place. I think many people, we've had it now expressed from across the community, from a rural and urban context, see themselves, if they're involved in cultural activity, not the arts, because the arts, the term arts, even the term arts, is an impediment to people getting involved in what is artistic activity. And that's not to take away from the level, as a dummy fluter myself, from the activity that you guys are involved in. Could you expand on that?
Yes, I would quite easily say that if you talk to any member of a marching band and you went through the list in your own research of what they consider arts, you could very quickly knock 90% of them out as something that they would never aspire to attend or attend. Opera, for instance, I think would be pretty low down in the percentages. Irish dancing, museums, they would probably be more interested in the museums actually because of the fact of the displays and exhibitions that museums put on, particularly in this decade of centenaries. But, you know, photography, poetry reading, etc. So that is their perception of arts. I think your own list of art forms very much reflects what they consider arts as well. And I think that's very telling that the two of those match up, so that not only is that perception there from the members of the band community, but is also there from the arts community. And I think there does have to be some positive engagement from the arts community to say, yes, we do consider you an art form. You're performing music. That music is a skill. It's a valuable contribution to society and to yourself. The bulk of our membership is working class. The bulk of our membership, and particularly those very, very strong bands, are from areas of social deprivation. And their opportunities to attend events the like of which are listed on your list of art forms are few and far between.
And I deliberately mentioned the Lord Mayor's show in London because you know, very much it just doesn't just draw from that city, but as the capital of the kingdom, it brings in people who excel across the community from the voluntary sector from across the UK. And so obviously it is with regret that if you've got the Lord Mayor in London inviting bands from Northern Ireland to take part in the Lord Mayor's show, a hugely prestigious event, and yet the Arts Council can't mention
Absolutely.
the band sector in publications, or have you take part in showcasing. I think that's an absolute outrage, I'd say. And I think something which we should perhaps pursue. But in terms of connectivity, because I've asked this to the previous, in terms of taking part or getting people to get involved, I know obviously band parades are a huge issue on Friday and Saturday evenings in the summer and through into the autumn, about getting people involved, but also I'm aware, you know, a lot of charity work going on. So does that help you bring in people into the sector that wouldn't join the band but will be supportive and get more people involved in terms of getting them involved in street art, which is exactly what it is.
Absolutely.
Which of course the Pinnacle Office is 12th.
Absolutely. If a marching event is taking place in a town, there are no barriers put up at the entrances to the town. Anyone can spectate. And I can think of many bands who their income from that parade, which is in many cases their sole income throughout the year, is donated straight to charity. And that charity itself doesn't have any criteria on where that funding goes to within that charity. So in terms of both spectating, participating, and where that funding goes to, particularly with charity donations, and there is approximately 600,000 per year donated by bands to the charities, and that's just by bands alone. There's absolutely total inclusivity across that, with no restrictions, and it really is the same. I think if marching bands were based, marching bands are based, and there are numerous marching bands in both the Republic of Ireland, in England, Scotland, Wales. We also have marching band members in Australia, in America, and when you go to countries like Germany, you have the equivalent. And members from Northern Ireland have actually participated in parades in Germany and Austria in the exact same scenarios and environs that they would participate here. But there's not the external and surrounding complications. And it's quite interesting to go and watch a band parade in Austria or in Germany. And see the entire community loving it, and yet hearing exactly the same musical standards, and sometimes better here, and musical performances as there are here.
And I know that you've got big band parades like Kilkeel and Dunloy and Drum in Monaghan and other, which I've been to all of those. The standard, and you mentioned the festival bands, standard in the Ulster Hall this year was there. My colleague Diane Dodds. It was standard in terms of music, deportment, discipline, it was first class, but also the fact that every one of the bands were excellent, but in terms of communitising, that's the key to the thing. I think if you've got 35,000 members, I've been impressed with some of the activity I've seen bands involved, bands that you guys are involved in yourselves, other people like Quincy Dugan, Nigel Kells and so on, bands that they're involved in, but the band actually is, in terms of capacity building and improving capacity of the community and the competencies within that community, and the sort of things that you were talking about, William. I think that's hugely important. Is that building up the credibility of the bands in the working class communities, particularly in an urban context that I have to talk about, but also in a rural context as well?
If I can answer that from my own, the Northampton Band Forum, we run courses on reading and writing because a lot of our members left school with no formal qualification. They weren't engaged with the education establishment. We also would do IT courses as well. Other things along the way. Not everybody that's involved in the band section will be to do with music. We will have the marshal and team, will have our first aid team, And all of that is very much based on each forum working with the local communities to identify who would like to participate, learn the skills and build those up so that whenever we are doing a parade, indoors or outdoors, it's not just the band on parade, it's all the infrastructure that goes with it, and that whole infrastructure also comes from the working class community. On your earlier point, William, I think the Arts Council themselves have yet to recognise that we are the largest traditional arts movement out there. And I think there is still, you can lift yearly their annual reports. It makes no reference to bands or very little in it. And there's that whole perception from the working class community that maybe it's easier to identify ourselves along the cultural route as opposed to the arts, because nobody within the arts movement really recognises the band movement as it stands currently.
So you're just going to make the point, Chairman. How on earth can we expect the working class communities then, particularly in this context, the working class Protestant community, to buy in to what we've heard from the establishment in terms of the arts, like the Arts Council, if they aren't even prepared to mention that culture in their publications? And, the truth of the matter is they can come and give evidence at this committee, but if they can't back it up by actually recognising that the tradition even exists, never mind give it recognition, I think that's a serious issue and which we need to pursue.
Could I just follow up on the point that William Humphrey made there? My understanding is that if you look at cultures and traditions and art forms across the world, in addition to the engagement with the Arts Council, which is our cultural establishment or cultural whatever, one of the other areas there, or two of the other areas, are it needs to be in the schools and it needs to be in the media. And if you're not in the school, you're not valued, because the school system is seen as, and there's plenty of academic evidence for this, that's seen as endorsing, valuing, validating, because that's what schools do. They teach things of value. And if you're excluded from the school, therefore you are automatically, by the education system, devalued. The public service broadcasters are required to reflect all of the cultural traditions and cultural diversity of the United Kingdom, and yet, other than the sporadic hatchet job done by some person who flies in and flies out and exploits people and abuses them, quite frankly, apart from that sort of sporadic abusive programme, there is not the reflection and inclusion by the public service broadcaster in the way that maybe Gaelic cultural traditions would be included. How do you feel about those 2 points?
The trying to get into schools is something that we have been trying to slowly advance for since the formation of COB in 2009. And we recognise very much that in order to get into schools that you have to have a across-the-board approach and be able to present and deliver standards and keenly assist in the education prospects of those children. So that's why we have worked very closely with the Ulster Scots Community Network to develop the OCN Level 2. And it is a very comprehensive 6-week, 20-week course. And what we are prepared to do very much so is to work with the USCN and the education boards to deliver that to schools on a voluntary basis. So we're quite happy to, in each of the schools, we already have within the bands forums throughout the province qualified tutors through the OCN course itself. And we're quite happy to go to the schools and provide those tutors free of charge, provide the instruments free of charge in some cases, and at the end of it deliver to their pupils an OCN Level 2. However, we're finding the same restrictions there that I know that other organisations from the perceived Protestant Unionist loyalist community have done, in that there's very much a reluctance, particularly by the the state-run schools, sorry, was that the controlled or the maintained? I can't remember the term. Controlled sector, very much a reluctance to engage there. Not actually to the same extent in the maintained sector. The maintained sector would be more approachable and more open to it, which is quite remarkable. I think it's mainly because the maintained sector are very open to traditional arts and traditional music and consider it in that same manner. So that answers the question really about the schools. We're very willing to work with it, but we're finding reluctance there to engage. The second side of that there is very much the media. And you're totally right. There is a lack of engagement there, unless it's a big news story and a negative news story. We consistently are approaching the media to say, what about all the good news stories from this sector? You only want to focus on the bad news. You only want to focus on the contentious issues. What about all the good news that there is coming from this community? And it is a sad fact that our media today is focused on bad news.
Could I just ask, maybe you could remind me, has the BBC ever televised the Festival of Bands in Ulster Hall?
Absolutely not.
Never?
The only way that we can have even a spread of that performance, and that's been running for 5 years now, and I'm involved in the organisation of that, is to pay ourselves for a video team to come in to record that, and then this newsletter actually sells it on and gains some profits from that. There's no profits whatsoever to that Festival of Ulster Marching Bands to the sector.
There's hugely important points, two hugely important areas about the media and schools, and they cross over into the work of the Education Committee as well, and something that I raised yesterday in the Education Committee. Under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and there was mention there about earlier on by another member about Section 75 and equality issues, there's also human rights issues. The UN Convention on the Rights of the Child states that every child within the education system has the right to learn about not just the opportunity, but the right to learn about the culture of the individual child and the culture of the home and community from which they come. And the United Kingdom is a signatory to that. The Department of Education, therefore, has a responsibility at the Northern Ireland level to address that. And I think there's something there about a denial of human rights to children from that community who are not given the opportunity to bring that culture. And your point about the difference between traditional between controlled and maintained schools, hugely important, because within the controlled sector there's a different view of culture from within. Now, not entirely, because in my local area the Boys Model School has a flute band which is excellent. They also, out at Glengormley, we have the Summer Marching Band, but we have the Lambegs and Fifes in the school. And those are good examples, but I think that as a committee, we should be looking at the cultural rights of the community. Could I just, because our time is under pressure, Basil McCrae.
Thank you, Chair. And return to the topic of working class engagement. I'll just leave the human rights bit out of it. What I've listened to just recently seems to me remarkably defensive, from people coming in here and all this. And I just noticed in your submission that the report from McClure Waters, I think, suggests that a re-imaging programme is required. And you also said in your opening statements that you thought that you were perhaps misunderstood. Would you just elaborate a wee bit on that for me?
Absolutely. I get this everywhere we go, and I'm often accused of being on a soapbox when I start talking to this, and I'm not surprised. We're pressured for time. It's very, very. The people within the sector itself are very aware of the levels of commitment and dedication involved. But once you step outside that, unless you've been personally involved in a marching band, you're not aware of that. It all goes very much. It's just part of the community. It's just what they do, and even the members themselves very much accept that's what they do. And I think we suffer very much from a focus of, particularly within this generation, it's always been there. It's always gone on, and there's no recognition of it because it's not new, and it's not the latest craze, and it's not maybe the newfangled idea out there, in terms of media re-imaging, these are all working people. They're all voluntary. We're all voluntary. We had to take time off our work today to attend the committee. And it's very difficult for people who are doing this outside of their working job to do that and to have the skills to do that as well.
Can I just want to take you to where, because you've said a couple of times that people in the marching band wouldn't consider themselves to be an arts or culture. But I start off, people make declarations of interest, so I'm going to make a declaration of non-interest in that I'm not a member of the Loyal Orders or involved in any way, in shape or form in that. But I have attended, I don't know if anybody else has attended, I have attended the World Championship Concert Flute Band in Armagh, where I saw Kelswater actually beat Ballygowan for, I think, the first time in ages. And I listened to concert flute band. I've actually never been to one. There's a bloke that sits in the middle with a curtain around him so he doesn't know who's been. And the standard was fantastic. Now, why did I go to that thing? Because I happened to meet some of the people at the BBC proms, and they said, oh, by the way, we're in Ballygowan flute band, we're world champions. And then actually I went to see them and they weren't, so that wasn't so good. But I just said that I don't think that you're selling that properly. And you see, whenever I have come up here, I just tell you, as someone that's sympathetic but comes from maybe outside, because there is a danger that you're just talking to yourself or you're talking to people in here that all agree with you. So here, I am a proud supporter of the Ormeau Concert Band, the Auchnaskey Silver Band, the Bailey's Mills Accordion Band, the Ballygowan Flute Band. I've even had the Field Marshal up here to go and do it. And what you understand is that these are people, real people. And when you get to know them, whatever bit, they're fantastic. So part of the issue that you put down here in this, because I think there's a great job for you to do about outreach to other working class people. I understand absolutely that you do a great job within our own community, as it were. But when you put things in here, I'll just ask you if you think that this could be perceived in a more difficult way. When you put things in, many bands will have drilled, perfected to military standards with halts, whatever, and they go through the militaristic aspect of things could be misconstrued by people that are not intimately involved with the marching band process.
I think the misconstrue maybe comes with an agenda. When I reflect that it maybe could be the terminology I could use could be different, but I was in a marching band for a long number of years, and we very much prided ourselves on our marching and discipline skills and spent an awful lot of time perfecting that. And there is actually, I can give you two examples. You can have a marching band shambling down the road who, whenever there is a halt in the parade, as always happens, they shamble to stop, and everybody stops at different times and in different steps and stands and looks round them and so on. Or you could have a band which comes down and, with the precision of an army unit, halts exactly to a non-verbal command given by their drum major. It's very impressive, and it is it's symbolic of the dedication that has gone into achieving that high level. We have some of our members who are, one of our marching band sector members is actually one of the head drum majors in the British Army, and regularly, in fact next week, is going to Washington and also to, I can't remember the name of the other big city in the States, to give talks on this, the inclusion of army marching bands. And they regularly will state that the decorum and marching and discipline skills within the marching bands here in Northern Ireland are on a par, if sometimes not above, those of
So if I said to you just on
Marching
the external bit, if you've ever been, I don't know if you have, to the New York St. Patrick's Day parade, and you see that they are marching bands in the militaristic fashion. And one of the things that I think in terms of the cultural things about is that people don't realise that the St. Patrick's Day parade did not come from the Irish tradition. It came from the British. Hold on, Chair. Chair, I'm developing a line of argument, and we're engaging in this, and I would like to ask a few questions, as you've given people lots of latitude from other places.
As long as they stay on the subject. The history of St Patrick's Day in New York, I'm well aware it's had a Scottish Irish tradition. We all know that.
It's about understanding, Chair, how we get the excellent work that the Marching Bands Association do with working class people, how we extend that to other areas. And I would like to develop that line of argument, and I don't think there's a problem in that.
Could I maybe
Stay
pick up
on
that?
the subject, Basil. That's the only point I would make.
Could I maybe pick up that point and refer to one of your earlier points? And also, Chair, it links in very closely to your own point. I know that you're talking about trying to get this, to spread the good news, as it were. One of the difficulties we do very much have is getting engagement from the media. What we find is that all of these marching bands submit details of their events to the local media, and the local media will not include it. They will submit good news stories, and the local media will not include it. We get lots of anecdotal evidence of that there. To the extent that Quincy Duggan, as mentioned earlier, writes a weekly column for the newsletter, and it took an awful lot of time and hard work to get that established in the newsletter. I write a weekly column for our local paper down in the North Coast, and it's completely voluntary. There is another paper down in Kilkeel-Newry direction which does the same, and again it's completely voluntary. The only way that we can get the good message out there is by actually taking and writing the columns ourselves without payment. And it's really a method of, okay, look, we're doing your work for you to get this work in, or to get this word into the papers, because the media will not engage. I have been talking to many independent production companies with a view to having programmes done on the marching sector. And they have submitted those ideas, as they do, to the BBC. And the BBC aren't interested. Yet we have figures from the BBC which reflects that the 12th programme, which is presented every year, and I always find it inconceivable, their broadcasting time, because they present it when the people who are actually involved in it and who want to see it are not in the house. But regardless, even with that taken into consideration, it has the highest broadcasting figures and viewing figures for a locally produced production and locally engaged production here in BBC Northern Ireland. But yet they're not willing to extend that coverage and to help us get that good news out there. So it is a very difficult thing for us to overcome. And secondly,
can I say to you in this? There's obviously some failure in communication somewhere, because I've already said to you, I am totally impressed at all levels. But I was watching, even I think a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, the Glasgow World Championships. Sat there watching, and frankly, it wasn't a patch on what happened here, but maybe I'll say. And I think there's a way about building allies to come back in, because there is an issue about differentiating, the different bands, about what's not, because I do think there's a real issue about being misunderstood. But part of it is because it's very visual what you do in other areas. So you have to understand that there's a way of explaining to people, look, this is what we do, this is why it's so good. It's like if you were up and looked at the Swiss drumming people, and you understood just the perfection that they were coming back, and people understood, oh yeah, that's really good. So what I would say in this, because obviously we've gone on a long time, and I'm happy to engage with you, but I'll tell you what, is that there is a feeling that those people that are not intimately involved in the marching bands are not really proper to come along and ask and talk things. And I think you need to take advice and information from people that are not so closely involved but are well-intentioned. And I think that's how you need to look at this. And I think there's a load of things, because I talked earlier to other people about how they have to be careful about imagery, that inadvertently, this bit where we can say, well, of course you can go and see the band, but that's different from being welcomed to go and do it. And I think we just need to maybe address that.
there is, I think, because of the continual criticism in the media, there is a tendency to to try not to the only phrase that can come into my head is a very colloquial one: to blow your own trumpet. And it's very difficult sometimes. And I mean, I've already talked about the levels of dedication involved in running these organisations, and to then ask again a working man with already these levels of dedication inside is out of hours work, to then take on a full-blown media campaign, it's very difficult.
But you three are very articulate, very impressive. I mean, I congratulate you, and I'm finishing this bit before the man at the front shouts at me. But I just said you've got a really good thing going here, but we need to have a discussion, and you just need to understand it's not preaching to the converted that works. You need to speak to people that are interested.
Can I just respond to that by saying that is actually what the Confederation of Ulster Bands is about, to spread that message. However, the one thing I do want to take you to remind you at this point, and this isn't negative by any means, is we're all working people, and the Confederation of Ulster Bands is not funded in any way. We receive no funding from anybody. So any work that we do is purely on a voluntary basis, outside working hours. We've been going 5 years, and what we've achieved to date in terms of the DECAL study, which was previously done, the DSD study, which was previously done, and even to the extent of the work that we're doing here today, is all done on a voluntary basis. And there is a point at which voluntary will only go so far. And I do think you're totally correct in saying that we do need to spread that message further. But I think we're almost getting to the point in which the work that Confederation of Ulster Bands are doing is at that limit because it is voluntary. We're quite happy to continue in that method because it's something that we all very passionately believe in and very passionately support, and we know that that passion is throughout the sector. But it does, media campaigns, the lobbying of media sectors, etc., does become very difficult when you are restricted on a voluntary basis.
Thank you. Rosie McCorney.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Can I ask you, how do you outreach to the say the nationalist community, where there would be contention in areas around bands, and what would your outreach programme be to try and break down the misunderstandings?
The areas of outreach programme are very different in very areas, obviously because of different climates in different areas. And I think I could quote very simply, as an example, the recent City of Culture up in Londonderry, in which the marching bands in that area were very heavily involved. And in actual fact, marching bands from that area took part in the FLA, which took part up there in Londonderry. It was actually the figures which come back from the reviews of the entire year of marching bands. It said that was one of the most positive and widely appreciated events of the entire City of Culture. So this engagement goes on regularly without any focus. It is the answer to that there. And I think it's probably underestimated how much engagement there is that goes on from a day-to-day basis without any focus. And it's just normal day-to-day activity. And I think that is one of the key things that we do need to achieve within the marching band sector, is the normalisation of the sector, so that it's not a big thing that you're in a marching band, that it's no more perceived than being a member of a GAA club, or being a member of an Irish dancing class, or being a member of a Highland class. It's an art form. You're engaging in it on a day-to-day basis. You don't make any difference to your work colleagues, to your friends, to your family, because you're in a marching band. And I think that's very key to that normalisation of the sector.
But I suppose what I would be saying is that might go on some places, and the Derry example is very good, but in places like North Belfast where there are huge issues, what would be going on in that area, and how does the activity of bands nightly at Camp Twiddle?
Sorry, I'm going to cut in there
My
because,
point,
sorry, just chairing the meeting. We go so far and then we get away from the core issue, which is how do we make sure that working class communities are included in the arts? Now, we can move away from onto other things as happened previously on another case, as I said, we had to pull it back, and I appreciate the fact there's all sorts of issues, but if we get into detailed discussions of our questioning about that, we've also still to get a presentation by Forrest Gaeilge and by DCAL. We've a time pressure as well, so I would prefer you just
I
stick to it.
accept your point, Chair, but I'd ask you to bear with me because I think that the question that I'm developing is central to maybe that exclusion and it's about how do we help move forward in contentious situations. So I'm actually talking about the nightly parades at Camp Tweddell and the incident outside St Patrick's Chapel, which were offensive.
No, sorry. Look, I'm going to stop.
You've had your day.
Rosie, yeah.
Chairman, I'm happy then to raise the issue about Sinn Féin organised and activised residents groups that are out to take affront and offence at a drop of a hat if we're going to go down
Sorry,
this road.
yes, and sorry, Rosie McCormick, I'm asking you to be quiet while I make the point. If we start going down that road, we'll get into the whole issue about what happens when a particular parade is attacked and so on. And I have to say, quite frankly, that it is, I think, disrespectful to the people who are here and unnecessarily divisive. But that's not surprising that we're down that road. So I would suggest that you get back to the issue. We're carrying out an inquiry into the inclusion of the arts in working class communities. The very thing we've been talking about normalising, isn't helped by that sort of question. If you have a question about the issue, please ask it. Otherwise, we'll move on to Ulrich Mullen.
I'm asking about bans and behaviour of bans. And
We're not here to discuss.
Well,
it's in front of us. Sorry, that's how. When you haven't anything to ask, we'll move on. Ulrich Mullen.
I would like my question answered.
Well, I would like a question that is specifically, and if I made the point, because as Mr. Humphrey has said, we will then start into a discussion about issues that members of your own party may not wish us to get into. So please.
Chair.
Now, you've made your point in a general way without getting into the detail of a particular situation. We'll let Valerie make her response and then we'll move on.
I'm quite happy to address that. I think your question drives back to what I said at the beginning, that this sector of the community very much suffers from, first of all, everything that goes all around it, which are not directly related to the business of bands, which is making music. Secondly, I think it also suffers very much so from the other point that I mentioned, where the media doesn't want to know about a good news story. So the incidents that you're talking about are what they consider a hot topic and a negative news story, and therefore are the focus. But what they're also not focusing on is the other layers of engagement which are positive in those same areas. And I think in order to comment completely on the question that you had asked, what we would need to actually look at is not only those areas that you've highlighted which are in the media, and those instances that you've highlighted which are in the media, but all the instances which aren't highlighted in the media and which we don't all have an awareness of, which are in the positive, which can help to outweigh the negative perceptions and publicity that there are around those events. So for every negative there is also a positive, and I think it's key that we consider those when looking at the marching bands, because we're all made very aware by the negatives because of the media coverage, but because it's very difficult to build relationships and to work on areas of difficulty in a media forum, that those are purposely either kept from the media or not reported from the media. And there's an awful lot of good work going on in those areas that I'm not fully aware of the details of, and I'm sure the committee here aren't fully aware of the details of. So it would be very, very unfair to comment on the negatives without also taking the positives into consideration.
Thank you. Ulrich McMullen.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. Would you agree that over this last few years you have received substantial funding from the Ulster Scots Agency, the Arts Council, the department?
I think
The answer is no. 300,000 a year is what we're pulling in this year, which, as I say, is roughly 1p for every person for 5 weeks.
If you take into consideration there are 633 approximately marching bands of the Protestant
That's what I was
persuasion.
going to ask you, if you don't mind me interrupting you. When you say there's 600 and so many bands, do you apply collectively, or does the bands
Individually.
apply individually?
Individually.
So that 300,000 is counted up individual?
Yeah. But the two schemes that's available, which is the Arts Council one where there's a pot of the 200,000,
Yeah.
and of that roughly 40 bands get, because you can get 5,000 per band.
Yeah.
But that excludes you for the next 7 years. And then there's the Ulster Scots Agency, which is the music and dance. But it's open to all groups, not just bands. So any community group can apply and do apply. Of those, there's only 50 bands this year have been funded. Because again, it's a scheme that's oversubscribed. The agency just do not have enough money to support all bands and community groups who wish to avail of.
And may I
that
also
scheme.
point at this time, we are here representing bands of the Protestant Unionist community. However, the funding schemes are also open to bands of the Nationalist AOH community as well, who regularly do subscribe to that funding. So the funding is not really just for the bands who we represent.
I know that.
The band is for
Yeah,
all. So when you really take that there's approximately 633 bands, approximately, who receive the funding that Cody was talking about, the 200,000 per year, when that's divided down to the maximum 500 or £5,000, 40 bands per year is all that gets funded out of 633. I don't know what the percentages of that there are, and there's no guarantee that those 40 bands are purely bands that we would represent from the PUL community.
And just like organisations within the nationalist community, you would then have to find out how many actually applied for the funding, because I did sit in the body a short time ago, and that was one of the questions. How many out of those 600 would have applied for funding?
Well, in the Arts Council one, because of the way it works, 280 or thereabouts are always excluded, because the time frame is once you're awarded, you can't apply for
7
another
years.
7 years. So that rules out roughly 40% of all bands cannot apply at any given time. But year on year, their scheme is always oversubscribed.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough.
I don't have the exact numbers.
And your OCN course, I was interested in that. What does that contain?
That's basically learning, it's a level 2 qualification in the Open College Network on how to learn the B-flat flute.
So it's music?
It's music. It's a music qualification. In the past, you would have had the piping bands and pipe bands already had a recognised qualification. Up until this point, the vast majority of people in bands, because of the cost, would tend to be flute and drum. So up until very recently, until the Ulster Scots Community Network introduced this, there was no recognised B-flat flute qualification.
It is very cleverly designed. What we tend to find within the marching band sector is that there's a mixture of A, abilities, and B, knowledge. So you do have some children who are able to read notation and music, and some members who are able to read notation and music, and you also get members who learn by what we call the numbering system. In other words, it's 6 fingers, 5 fingers, 4 fingers.
Yeah.
And the course is very cleverly designed to cater for both of those ranges in the way that it is laid out. The music is all things like Burns pieces, I can't remember
Gospel
what,
tunes.
Gospel tunes, Amazing Grace, things like that.
Yeah.
There, all very,
Nursery rhymes.
all very simplistic and very, but of a certain standard to which education would subscribe.
Well, the good relations policy, and I was looking at it through this here. I see there was you helped to fund a football pitch. Where was that?
One of the football pitches. Bear in mind that there is incorporating both the Orange Order and the bands.
There's one
Market Hill.
Yes.
Market Hill.
Market Hill, and there's one at Antrim, Burnside.
Burnside.
And Antrim would be the closest one, Oliver.
Well, would you agree with the chair when the chair talks about the human rights, the right to learn, the right of the child, and its cultural rights and perception?
Very much so. I'll give you an anecdote from my own family. My family are involved with a local band down to us, Balroshane, Protestant Flute Band, and they were formed over 107 years ago. And my great-grandfather was one of the founding members. My grandfather was in the band, my father was in the band, my brother was in the band. To my great disgust, I wasn't allowed to join. And my son is now in the band.
Why?
Because it's a traditionally male band.
Oh.
But I actually agree with that now. But my son is now in that band. So my son has been in that band since he was 2.5. My son knows absolutely nothing about religion. My son knows absolutely nothing about any of the conflict that goes on in the country.
That's good. We want to talk
And
about.
he thoroughly enjoys
Yeah,
it.
good. That's good to hear. When you talk about cultural rights, is that a broad spectrum of cultural rights, or is it centred around music only?
It depends on the person's interest. My son currently is only there because of the music.
Yeah.
How he personally wants to develop after that is entirely up to him. The marching bands do allow you the opportunity to find out more about your history, to find out more about your culture. Because I personally am also very heavily involved in the Ulster Scots movement, he's finding out through that, through his performances and that there. And for a 4-year-old to be able to sit on a stage in front of 500 to 600 people and quite confidently perform a solo, I'm not really sure what other art sector you would be able to develop that confidence and musical ability in on a voluntary basis.
Well, you know, the Cultus Culturally Earn has the same structure with the same age group and the same periods and all that there. But in the cultural rights of the child, Chair, I was very interested in what you were saying. Would you expand that into the rights of the child to the Irish language? If it's the cultural right of the child under the European Charter?
More than happy to do that.
That's very good. Glad to hear that one.
Could I say to the member, and we'll do that on another occasion after this, because children do actually have the opportunity to learn Irish in maintained schools and in Irish medium schools. Point is, other cultural traditions are excluded.
No,
There's already a provision there.
I was just
Absolutely.
wondering, because of your headlines in the paper, that the Irish language is going nowhere.
Absolutely happy to deal with that, but it's certainly not.
Oh, okay.
We've been flexible with people about what they've raised. That's way outside it. Thank you very much, Oliver, for your questions. Gordon Dunn.
Yeah, apologies for missing your presentation. Just briefly, just congratulate you on your good work. I think you do an invaluable service to the local community, and you obviously appreciate that the intolerance issue that we've seen demonstrated here today. It's worked out in the communities, it's worked out in the streets, but an organisation like yourselves do a lot to try and manage the situation. We appreciate that very much. And I do take your point about the media coverage. Any media coverage seems to be just negative, and I think something needs to be addressed, and the media need to start being balanced, being constructive about work like yourselves do. And, it is a two-way street, not a one-way street. We're fully supportive of what you do. And finally, just what more can be done to bring young people in? What about involvement with schools, involvement with youth groups? I know you do a lot of that, but what more can be done to try and broaden out your appeal to more young people? Because it is positive what you do. You're engaging with young people, you're showing them many skills, as you've demonstrated there in your document. Something that's good and is lacking in a lot of our communities.
I think that it is.
You're bringing forward.
I think it is very cyclical, to be honest. No mother is going to want their child to join an organisation which is demonised and is only ever seen as negative in the media. So by helping to address those, that helps to encourage mothers to let their children join organisations like our own. From my own personal experience, the experiences, the networking, the people I've met, the friends that I've made through the marching band sector, and I'm sure William and Cody can say the exact same. I would never have had those experiences and skills that I have learnt through my involvement. And that's why I personally am very, very happy to let my child be involved with marching bands, because I'm aware of the good work that they do. However, as I say, unless we can tackle the negative media perception, the demonisation that happens to marching bands, and if we can achieve that normalisation of the sector, then I think that very much stands us in good stead to build on the very good work that we do. And I would point out we are, without doubt, the one sector and the one arts sector, which strongly represents and engages in the youth community, particularly the male youth community in those age groups. And I actually, in our submission, we printed the figures of membership of our bands and the terms of percentages of male and female, and you'll see it is very, very strong, right up to the age of 35, from the age of 4 upwards.
Okay, well done. Thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Very, very final question, William Hunt.
It's not a question, Chair. A number of members have raised the issue about media, and obviously you in your presentation have raised the issue. A member of the Church of Ireland clergy contacted me on behalf of a band from County Tyrone that took part in the programme called Break for the Border, which was a joint BBC RTE programme. They did an interview for a considerable length of time, and they had a hatchet job done on them.
Absolutely.
And that band believed that they were, well, totally let down by that, and I asked and got a meeting with the controller of BBC Northern Ireland. That sort of thing, when people are putting themselves up to talk about their cultural experience, to be belittled and ridiculed in such a way is just off-putting, and it adds to the demonisation that has been going on for some time. And then it perpetuates the whole intolerance and ignorance issues.
Yeah, I'm very aware of that issue. And it is when you do feel that you're going to be demonised and misinterpreted and misperceptions almost validated, it becomes very difficult to persuade members of the marching band community to continue to engage in that way. It's something we're continually working with and encouraging, but incidents like that there definitely don't help.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Indeed. Appreciate your...
Quickly add 2 points. In terms, which doing relate sometime, you were asking about outreach work. Last year, shortly after the new Archbishop of the Church of Ireland came into office, the Armagh Bonds Forum actually met with him and gave a personal presentation of the work of the Bonds Forum and the outreach work which we are proposing to do. Of more recent times, we have been meeting with the good relations officers of the, for the moment, Armagh Council, and to develop some sort of a pilot strategy to do outreach work both to schools and communities at large. That is kind of sort of on limbo at the minute because post 1st of April, it's obviously going to be new staff we're going to be dealing with in the new ABC Council. I think we should commend the Church of Ireland and the support that they've given to the Zacchaeus project, which is led by Valerie Tom, doing great work with bands and working with bands at large demonstrations and parades as well.
Thank you.
Sir, can I just say, I think the opportunity to challenge some of the negativity of this here was lost today because some of us were gagged from asking their questions.
I think that we're not dealing with the issue of negativity today because that's been a long...
I think an opportunity missed. I think it's an opportunity missed.
Well, that may be your view, but we have a remit within which this inquiry is operating, which is about inclusion and helping people to be included in the arts of working class communities. I think the information has been extremely helpful and appreciate that, and I'm sure it will feed into the final recommendations from the committee. Thank you indeed.
That's the point.
He's like, no mirror, does that say? That's all the way to join up.
The girl and the fellow probably had to do with Ireland with
Who's he?
No, Basel, right? You've seen the wee fellas go to the two. He's only Okay, the next item on the agenda then is the briefing from Forrest Gaeilge and Decal on Irish language issues. Could I refer members to the Clerk's memo at page 43? There's also a briefing paper from Forrest at page 46 and a reply from the Minister regarding LIFA on page 47, which was considered at last week's meeting and it was agreed to return to it at this week's meeting. And shortly we'll welcome then the folks from Forrest and the department. It is on coming. That's good. Could I welcome to the committee today with Ferdy McNally from Forest of Gilliga, Shona Coyne from Forest, and Arthur Scott from DCAL, and invite you to make an opening presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. The Department in Forest of Gaeilge welcome the opportunity to provide an update to the committee about our work to protect, support and develop the Irish language. The imminent launch of a public consultation by the Department on its proposals for an Act na Gaeilge, Irish Language Act, and the publication of a strategy to enhance and protect the development of the Irish language on the 30th of January 2015, in line with the 2011-2015 programme for government.
Right, could I just pause? What was the bit there about the Irish Language Act?
Sorry, the date?
Sorry, you just gave did you give a date there? Sorry, I was reading something and I missed that wee bit. Just if you could run over that again for me, please. Apologise.
Right. So you want me to start it again?
Oh, okay, fair enough.
The imminent launch of a public consultation by the Department on its proposals for an Act na Gaeilge, the Irish Language Act,
right,
and the publication of a strategy to enhance and protect the development of the Irish language,
right,
on the 30th of January 2015,
right,
in line with the 2011-2015 programme for government. Represent two more key milestones in the Department's overall strategy to promote and support the Irish language. In passing, I should mention also that a strategy to enhance and develop the Ulster Scots language, heritage and culture will also be published on the 30th of January, although that's not the focus of today's proceedings. The Irish language strategy will set out a roadmap for the language for the next 20 years, and an interdepartmental strategy delivery group will be established to oversee the development of relevant action plans by individual departments to implement the strategy. Continued progress towards the target of 10,000 people signed up to the Department's LEAFA Challenge by 2015 highlights the success and motivational impact of this campaign in encouraging people from all walks of life to learn Irish or improve their fluency. Finally, departmental support for and direct involvement in the implementation of the Gaeltacht Quarter Action Plan highlights the use of Irish to drive community-led social and economic regeneration through a portfolio of projects. These departmental actions provide a strategic framework for Irish and complement the activities of Forest na Gaeilge. Sure, at this point I'd like to hand over to Ferdy to say a few words.
Oh my God, Chair. In terms of LEAFA and Forest na Gaeilge's support for the LEAFA initiative, in September 2011, Carol Nicholin, the Minister in the Department of Culture, Arts and Leisure, launched the LEAFA 2015 initiative. The initiative was aimed to register 1,000 people to undertake the challenge of achieving fluency in the Irish language before the end of 2015. The initiative at that stage was discussed with Forest na Gaeilge. However, Forest na Gaeilge was not in a position to drive the project due to a lack of resources. Human resources. Staffing levels in Forest na Gaeilge are approved by the North-South Ministerial Council and have never reached the original staffing complement of 78 approved in principle. This complement is made up of the original proposed complement of 65 contained in the strategic plan approved by NSMC in 2001 and an additional 13 staff to develop the areas highlighted in a review carried out in 2006 but mooted in the original strategic plan. That review made recommendations regarding ASH, the Irish Language Book Distribution Service run by Forest na Gaeilge, and GUM, the publishing house, which was transferred into Forest na Gaeilge on its foundation, and An Costa Chermiachta, the Irish Language Terminology Committee, which was likewise transferred into Forest na Gaeilge at its founding, and the setting up of a fourth directorate comprising lexicography, terminology and publishing, and proposed 13 new staff to drive these areas forward. We currently have a staff complement of 58, 20 fewer than envisaged in the strategic plan and in the review. We have supported the LEAFA initiative in various ways. Our application forms asks applicants what support they are affording to LEAFA and encourages them and their participants to register with LEAFA where appropriate. We have also provided information and language promotion materials at stands at the various LEAFA celebrations. The LEAFA campaign has been supported extensively at local level by organisations that are funded by Forest na Gaeilge, including the 11 organisations in receipt of funding under the Scéim Phobal Gaelic scheme, and Culturlan Macadam O'Fiach in Belfast and Culturlan Shannon in Derry City. Forest na Gaeilge has engaged intensively with its core funded bodies and latterly with the 6 new lead organisations on ways in which they can support the LIFA initiative within their specific language remit. We have also provided grant support to a Gaeltacht-based course provider to provide bursaries for people registered with LIFA and who are attending their courses. During 2013 and 2014, Forest na Gaeilge supported DCAL in procuring and developing the LIFA website and in acquiring 2 language learning facilities which are available through the LIFA website. Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to speak? No? Okay, thank you. Rosie McCormick first.
Email called Ra Armagin. Very welcome and thanks for the presentation. Just a couple of specific questions. Can you confirm the exact amount of funding going to language bodies? Maybe Arthur?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information. The business plans were agreed just before Christmas break, and I don't have it. But I could write it.
Could you get that from me? Okay, thank you very much.
It may be helpful just to say that the level of reduction agreed by sponsor ministers, finance ministers and NMSC is 1%, and equated with the 7% reduction that was imposed on the body against the one, which is of the minister, and our balance out as 8% over the years from 2014 and 2015, so they're in line and consistent with what was requested and agreed by both finance ministers. So the level of cut that will be experienced by the language body, both Forest na Gaeilge and the Ulster Scots, will be less than would have been in previous years.
Okay, so just in terms of clarity, can you just confirm that the North-South bodies will not be subject to the 11.2%?
No, the cut that has been agreed by the 2 finance ministers is a 4% cut on this year's budget. It's slightly complicated in the way it's 7 and 1 over the 2 years. It should have been 4 and 4, but it balances it over 2 years, which is what's required by the 2 finance ministers. Thanks
very much. And just in relation to the new structure, the new structure for Irish language organisations, in relation to Gaelscoill na Cho, can you clarify how they're fulfilling their remit in the north? They're one of the lead bodies.
The remit for Gaelscoill in the north was concerned with early years support in Níoscoill. The position is currently up in the air due to the intervention of DE, who provided interim funding for the provision of in-school support for Irish medium preschools, and they have provided that up until the end of March, based on an interim business case from Comhairle na Gaelscoill. A more comprehensive business case from Comhairle na Gaelscoill was to be forwarded to DE. We had a meeting with the minister in DE in late November, early December, just can't remember exactly when, in terms of the long-term funding for that. So we have 2 positions with Gaelscoill which have not been filled yet, because we do not know whether that support for early years will be provided through a grant from DE to Comhairle na Gaelscoill, or whether we will be, as originally envisaged by us, asking Gaelscoill to provide that service, which is essential for the Irish medium Níoscoill. So, in a way, we had been told that we would have an answer by Christmas on the business case. We still haven't had that, but I know that DCAL have been in discussions with DE. We have been in discussions with DE trying to find out what the position is and how we move this forward.
Okay, but given it's Gaelscoill na Cho, who are the funded body for delivery, I mean, in fact, DE just stepped in because they didn't want to leave that part of the sector in the north. without those very essential resources. Would for us consider then bringing, facilitating the discussion with Altram and Corlia so that this situation can be brought to a proper conclusion and that the relevant funding can be sorted out?
Well, we're waiting on word back from DE on what their longer term plans are in terms of support for preschool. We have charged Gaelscoileanna with providing that. We have provided them with the ability to employ 2 staff to do that, but there's still that uncertainty in that we don't know the long-term plans of DE. We're waiting for those. We're hoping to get those back very quick, and then we will be in a position to go back and discuss the whole thing again with Gaelscoileanna.
I suppose it's important to say that we would be supportive of that type of an arrangement whereby the Department of Education, through its arm's length body, Corlia na Gaelscoileatta, would provide support for preschool education in the same way that they do for primary and post-primary. It's a logical extension of that role, and the support role that Forest na Gaeilge historically had in that area was to fill a gap that nobody else was addressing at the time. But logically speaking, it probably should sit with the Department of Education and with Corlia na Gaelscoileatta, and then by extension to Altram.
But the reality is the funding for that does lie with Gaelscoileanna. So they actually have funding to fulfil that remit, then that's
Well,
the
if that's the
reality.
case, well then we will be asking Gaelscoileanna, if that's what the decision of the Department of Education is, not to provide funding for Corlia na Gaelscoileatta for that area, well then, as our Chief Executive has said, that's the procedure that will take place. We have already agreed with Gaelscoileanna that is one of the key functions of the new funding arrangement for the North.
So then you'd be willing, in that eventuality, you'd be willing to facilitate that conversation with all those groups?
I don't think it's a case of facilitating a conversation. We've been in close negotiation with the Department of Education on this. It's a decision for them. If they decide to go one way, we'll support that. If they decide not to support preschool education through funding, we'll go back to Gaelscoileanna and ensure that they then do that.
Okay.
Just on the back of that, can I ask, what was the level of funding that went to Altram and the other body that was mentioned there? Just a ballpark figure. I'm not asking.
130,000 euro.
140,000 went to Altram. And Gaelscoileanna was somewhere in the region of 400. And these are not exact figures.
Yeah, understand.
Somewhere in the region of about
Appreciate that.
450,000 to Gaelscoileanna.
So overall, it would be about 600,000 euro.
Yeah, if you
Yes,
combine
the
those
two
two
together,
figures together,
yes.
yeah.
Which is about £500,000 sterling, right? Okay, and that the money that previously went to those organisations from Forest is now being provided by the Department of Education.
No. It's more complicated than that.
I knew it would be. I had that sense it would be. Yes.
The funding that we provided for Altram was for the provision of the running of the organisation.
Right.
And the provision of
What is this?
Early year
specialists going into preschools and providing the support at the coal face, if you like. So there were a number of different elements to it. My understanding is that the funding from DE is for the early year specialists.
Okay.
But the funding for Gaelscoileanna Choranta, just to clarify that, was for their remit in the Republic of Ireland. They had no remit in the north of Ireland.
Oh, right, okay. Could I ask Arthur there on the department side, could you put it in writing to us, explain all that? Because I've got the gist of it, I think, now, but it is quite complicated if you're not overly familiar with the educational sector.
Sorry, Arthur, can I just clarify exactly what it is you want? It's to explain the role of Altram in terms of preschools in the north.
Yes, what do these organisations do, first of all? If that could be explained in just a few lines. I'm not asking for a thesis, just 4 or 5 lines, whatever. And then what money was attached to these things and what happened in terms of it transferring to DE or whatever.
I think it's just by background, Chair, if you permit. I mean, Ultron was one of the previous, as referred to, core-funded bodies.
Yes.
There were 19 bodies, and through a very long process and two public consultations, those arrangements were changed with the approval of NMSC. So there were 6 providers on an all-island basis, and Ultron wasn't selected to be one of them. Very late in the process, just before the new arrangements were to take place in July 2014, DE decided at the last moment to intervene to provide funding to Ultron, and that's what, in a sense, altered the implementation plans that Forest na Gaeilge had crafted for the new arrangements for the 6 lead bodies delivering on an all-island basis. So Gael Sculliana, who were also one of the 19 but were a successful body in terms of the new funding arrangements, were to provide that service on an all-island basis. But because of the intervention of DE, they've held back from employing 2 staff to provide those services. And
if you put down range so we can, because it's just hard for someone to get our head. William Humphrey.
Thanks, Chair. And please don't take offence if I don't get the pronunciations right. But there are a number of questions that I wanted to ask. Ferdy, you said that your optimum in terms of the ideal workforce would be 78. You were 58. But as we've heard from the committee before, or at the committee before from the department and now from you, you didn't have the resource to take on LIFA. Can I ask why?
Because the staff that we currently have are all engaged on various other schemes that we run, be that the new lead organisations monitoring and evaluating the work of the new lead organisations, or the 19 core funded organisations as was. The Scam Football Gaelic, which I mentioned, which is where 19 officers are funded in communities right across the island to implement a local language development plan, whether it be our summer camp scheme, our youth activity scheme, or whether they be working on the dictionary or in the book distribution service or in our publishing house.
Right. So how many staff were required to deliver LIFA?
I felt that there would need to be at least one person full time. That's how I viewed it at the time.
So out of your 58 staff, you couldn't provide one person?
In 2011, and I don't remember exactly how many we had, but I know we didn't have 58 at that time.
What did you have?
Sorry, I don't honestly remember. I'd have to go back and check.
But it's important, you see, because...
It was a few less than 58.
Right, well, say it's 50. You still, out of that 50, couldn't get one person for this LIFA project to be actualised.
No.
You see, the reason I make the point is, I know the reason I ask how many staff are required. See, it's my view, and as someone who you know worked and directed the Ulster Scots community organisation, and I know yours is the state body. Surely, by the department, and I'll come to that, the department directing and running LIFA undermines you as an organisation.
No, I see it as complementing the work that we do at a grassroots level. I see it as complementing the work that the groups that we fund do at a grassroots level.
But surely there would be people out there who take the view, what's the point of having them if the government's going to do it?
No, I don't. Sorry, the groups that we fund to work with the language in the community all view the work that they do as the promotion of the language, and we see this as something that is supplementary to what they're doing and is giving them an added incentive to become more fluent in the language.
So, can I then ask you, do you think it's appropriate, as the director of Forest na Gaeilge, do you think it's appropriate that the government do it and not you?
I think that anyone who is providing the support for the language, I would welcome, yes.
Right. So you felt there was one member of staff required. Arthur, how many members of staff in the department are dealing with LIFA now?
At the moment, there is one LIFA officer and one assistant LIFA officer, so there are 2 officers full-time on LIFA duties. They're out meeting groups, doing outreach.
Full-time? How many? Any part-time?
No, they're full-time.
Are there any part-time?
Sorry?
Are there any part-time?
No, there are part-time members of staff in the department, but there are no part-time members of staff employed on LIFA.
Okay.
And then obviously they're line managed by other staff in the department who have a range of other duties who provide line management.
Okay, we heard earlier on about north-south budgets, and they're being reduced by 4% in terms of the language bodies.
Right, just to clarify, it's 1% this year. They are required to deliver a 4%, but they delivered a 7% saving last year. So over the 2 years, it's 4 and 4.
Okay. You'll be aware I asked a question in the spring of last year about the extra resource going to LIFA and what was it going to unlock for the Ulster Scots Agency as the equivalent body. How much has that unlocked for the Ulster Scots Agency?
Well, the Ministerial Advisory Group has spent, or will have spent by this March, over £3 million. So that's additional money to the sector.
No, extra money, extra resource, extra money. That's what I asked for.
It is currently working on proposals for a LIFA type Ulster Scots initiative, which would look at language. Work to complete that is ongoing.
So
a consultant is carrying out a feasibility study for the Ministerial Advisory Group, and there should be a business case, a proposed programme and costings for that available at the end of March. So to answer your question, in that sense, no additional money has been put into that. The programme is being designed, or proposals for a programme.
Yes, I've met the consultants, and so 10 months on, I think it is, not a single more penny has been given to Ulster Scots, and yet I have listened here to the fact that Forest na Gaeilge has 58 staff, that LIFA is being driven from the department, which I don't, as I've said before this committee, I've said, I think when you were previously giving evidence, I don't think that's appropriate at all. I believe it undermines the body set up to promote Irish language. They don't, strangely. I then have to ask the point, you know, I listened then to extra money going in from the Department of Education, and it's felt that it's not appropriate that they should be doing it, but they stepped in to do it. So there's extra funding coming for Irish, not just directly funded by the Northern Ireland Government and taxpayer and the Republic of Ireland equivalent, but there's money going in from DCAL extra and above the money set aside for Irish language going in from LIFA, and then there's extra money going in from the Department of Education over and above the money that the Department of Education already puts into Irish language. Is that fair?
It's not a comment on what the Department of Education does. I can only comment on behalf of what the department does.
Yeah, but you are the Ulster Scots Agency's Director of Languages, aren't you?
No, sorry, I'm the Director of Culture. I'm the sponsor for the Ulster Scots Agency.
Right.
And for the language body.
And for the language body. So are you the civil servant responsible for both?
I'm responsible for the sponsor, yes, of both. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, as the civil servant responsible for the Ulster Scots Agency and Forest na Gaeilge, is that fair?
The department has argued through the Minister in terms of the funding that was made available for both bodies, and you know, as has now been demonstrated by what has happened in the 15-16 year, that point has been made in terms of reducing the above average cuts that were being imposed upon both the Forest na Gaeilge and the Ulster Scots Agency. I think that's an outcome that the department is pleased with and that I would support.
Yeah, and
I can't answer.
It's like watching or listening to an episode of Yes Minister, quite honestly. That's not an answer at all.
I don't know what you want me to say.
Sure, I may have other questions, but
okay. Councillor Hoshin.
Cheers, Whiterove, like in question, and John, you, Arish. You're very welcome back to the committee again. 10,000 people signed up for LIFA.
The target's 10,000, we're just above 9,000, so very close to achieving the target.
Your officers run then, okay. Well, we've heard a lot in this committee before about comparing like with like, or apples or oranges, forgive the pun. But has the Ulster Scots Agency come forward with anything remotely like LIFA at any point?
There are similar, there's the Ulster Scots School flagship programme, and there's an equivalent in terms of what would be comparable to a Gaeltacht, which is a heartland, and I understand that progress has been made in those, certainly on the heartland, which would be similar to Gaeltacht in the Irish sector. that the review of public administration and the focus of councils at the moment has slowed that down a little. But at the monitoring meeting with both the agencies of the language body earlier this week in Dublin, there was a fairly positive upbeat report from the Chief Executive. So I would say, in a different way, there are initiatives that are being progressed by the agency. But the Language and Cultural Development Initiative on the Ulster Scots is something that's been undertaken in conjunction with the sector by the Ministerial Advisory Group. And it's the culmination of that work. I mean, there has been a cost incurred in terms of a staffing cost. And the arrangements put it up so far of about £12,800. Say there is a consultant, Laura Spence, who's conducting a feasibility study on that, and the department awaits to see the outcome of that work and the proposals and the costs.
We've heard about this Heartland project for Yonks. I don't know if that's an Ulster Scotism or not, but we've heard about it many times.
It's not actually.
It's not. All right, there you go.
Well, I think I explained. I think it certainly looks, a very worthwhile project, and there was a lot of excitement in the agency about it. It certainly was very well received at the North-South Ministerial Council by the ministers, who are always very keen to hear about the progress. But my understanding is that the focus of councils at the moment has delayed this. But Ian was quite optimistic that there could possibly be one, possibly two areas sometime during 2015.
Yeah. Okay, if Yonks is not in the dictionary, I'm still waiting on an Ulster Scots dictionary as such. I know there was some money given some years ago. Where's that at now? Has that been progressed anywhere?
There was a glossary,
quite substantial money, as far as I recall.
Issued, which had been on the stocks for a long time, and work on that process continues.
And have you any idea how many classes exist with in terms of Ulster Scots?
I again. May as well. Everybody else asks any questions.
Cheers. It's the only opportunity we have, saying the Ulster Scots Agency hasn't been up in front of us for some time.
Might be an opportunity then to invite them.
Might be.
Well,
Might be.
Go to their offices that we proposed some time ago.
In fact, that would be an even. I'm sure the member would agree we could hold a meeting down in the new offices.
I don't care where it's held.
Good. That's excellent.
If there's questions to be answered, I don't care where they answer them.
We've dealt with that issue for a future meeting then.
The agency run a number of programmes that provide an opportunity for people to engage in Ulster Scots language or culture. As to precise numbers, I couldn't say off the top of my head, but I can write to that.
Do you know how many classes are run or how many people are involved?
They do run music tuition. They had a
language classes
in schools, but I couldn't just say off the top of my head what it is. I could come back with the details.
Maybe we'll get that off the agency, maybe.
Just following on from the question and the answer you got received there, the piece of work commissioned through the department for an equivalent piece of work or project or initiative like LIFA, why was that given to the Ministerial Advisory Group on an Ulster Scots Academy when it really has a role that is explicitly? It's on Ministerial Advisory Group on Ulster Scots, the Ministerial Advisory Group on an Ulster Scots Academy. Why were they given? Why was their civil servant given the role of overseeing that piece of work?
I understand that all the sector bodies are involved. I suspect because of the broad range of it, I'll have to come back to that, Chair. I don't honestly know.
Was that your decision?
No, I thought it was a consensus decision. I can remember
consensus amongst who?
It's been asked among the stakeholders within the sector. The agency and the academy meet regularly to discuss each other's programmes of work to avoid duplication and ensure coordination across the sector.
Well, could I ask?
It's been a consensus decision.
And there was a meeting at which that was discussed.
I think. From recollection, sure, I provided the details of the dates of a previous meeting. There certainly was a meeting about it. I can look that up again.
And it'd be interesting to get the background to that, because it seems to me that if a group is set up as a Ministerial Advisory Group on an Ulster Scots Academy, that should be what it does. I would have thought the other fell outside that remit, because it is not part of an Ulster Scots Academy.
Well, why I hesitate to answer, Chair? I mean, I was aware that the work was undertaken on the initiative. I wasn't aware that there had been any concerns raised within in the sector, and which is why I'm reporting on the progress that's been made and when it's likely to finish, and who's involved in it. I wasn't aware there were any concerns about it, but I'd certainly look at that.
Right.
Oliver McMullen.
Yes, has the feedback from the new funding model indicated that it had improved services to the Irish speakers? And has the absence of a lead organisation originating in the north of Ireland
Well, certainly,
had any impact?
the committee will recall there were a number of concerns expressed when we appeared together before to brief the committee on the new proposals, and since July, when the new arrangements have been set up, many of these concerns, risks that were identified, appear to have failed to be realised. From discussions that I've had independently from Forest na Gaeilge with the 6 lead organisations, I think the new arrangements are bedding in well. People are getting used now to collaborating across the sector to deliver services to the Irish-speaking community. And the progress reports that we are receiving from Forest, and no doubt Ferdy or Sean can go into the detail, suggest that at this stage in the process, 6 months in, 7 months, the process is working well, and there hasn't been any huge volume of queries or concerns expressed by the communities that the lead organisations are serving. So on that basis, I would say we're pleased with how things are going, and there are plans for the department, the minister, to independently meet the 6 lead bodies to receive a direct update from their perspective as to how they think the new arrangements are going. I think maybe Freddie or Shane would like to add that.
We're happy with the way the implementation is going. So far, there have been 8 meetings of the Partnership Forum. That's the 6 lead organisations, Forest na Gaeilge, and the chair of the Language Development Forum. There have been 2 meetings of the Language Development Forum. Budgets for 2015 and staffing levels have been agreed. There are a number of positions still to be filled, especially those 2 in Gaelscoileanna, which we were discussing earlier on in terms of the staffing levels in the organisations. Sean?
Yeah, the general response that we're getting from the Irish language community is that it's a wait and see. They're not expecting the lead organisations to be in a position to be delivering in the way that we all expect them to do by the end of this year, for instance. But in relation to the presence in the north, there are, as part of the recruitment process, there are now 10 members of staff based in the north. 6 of those are based in an office in Newry, which is one of the objectives of the restructuring, was that we would move staff out of Belfast and Dublin out into areas where there was developing Irish language communities to support them. 2 of them continue to be based in Armagh. There's one new member of staff based in Belfast, and likelihood of another being based in Belfast as well. So we're certainly very encouraged by the response of the lead organisations to their new roles and how they've embraced what we've asked them to do. And we're also encouraged by the anecdotal response from the Irish language community as well.
That's good. Okay.
Could I just ask a couple of points there, and this is a question I want to direct to Arthur, and I suppose Ferdy as well. The department has set up a ministerial project to take forward an arts and culture strategy.
But you keep on well enough.
Yes.
And there are 2 groups there. There's a sort of departmental one, and then a sort of one that's headed up by the Arts Council.
Ministerial Advisory
Forum. The other one is called the...
It's the Ministerial Arts Advisory Forum, Chair.
Yes, that's the one chaired by the Arts Council.
It's chaired by the Arts Council Chairman.
Yeah, and then the other one is the one...
Chaired by it's 4 departments, and I will be chairing that.
Okay. Last week we wrote to, and this will comes back to Forest in a moment. Last week we wrote to the department saying this process had been set up and just raising some points about the membership of these bodies. In terms of the one that you would be chairing, which deals with arm's length bodies, are Forest and the Ulster Scots Agency part of that?
I haven't actually looked at the detail. We are making the Ministerial Arts Advisory Forum is meeting today, Chair. I understood it was to be an interdepartmental group, but if you're asking could we look at sectoral bodies, yes, we could. The brief for the arts strategy is arts, museums and libraries. I mean, there was quite a considerable debate in the department about just what an arts culture strategy should involve, because you could make it so wide to cover everything, and there was a narrow focus, certainly from the department's perspective, in terms of it would look at the arts, the museums and libraries. But I'll take on board what you're saying and look at.
Although there is already a museums policy, and
I'm aware. Yeah. It was in the context, Chair, I think, of the opportunities for people to get engaged in and participate and to experience.
I think, I assume Forrest would be happy enough to participate in that.
I mean, if we're invited by the department to sit on a body which is drawing up an arts and cultural strategy, naturally we will take part.
And I think having the agency and Forrest together would give it an extra dimension.
Sure. I mean, in terms of the remit of both bodies is to consult widely. So
right.
While people may not be prescribed in the initial, here's who's going to be a member of, there is certainly absolutely no limitation on who either of the two groups can talk to take views and to seek advice.
The difference between 20 people and then having a seat at the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to demonstrate, Chair, is there's no attempt to exclude, but there was certainly a parameter of discussion as to just what areas the strategy should actually cover. But I note your comments on it.
Yeah. Could just ask then, when we come to the I'll take the other question and then I'll come back to that one. William Humphrey?
Yeah, there was just one question, Arthur. I wondered if you could provide the figures. You may not have them with you today. Over and above the money that goes from the taxpayer to Forrest na Gaeilge, how much more money has been spent by the department on the LIFA project since its inception?
To date, it's £624,879.
624.
879, and the key areas of spend relate to the advertising campaign, which was approved by the executive, and that was £196,957. The Gaeltacht Bursary Scheme, which was £116,152. The LIFA website.
Could you send us those figures?
Yes.
Yeah. If you don't
You
mind.
want me to rehearse them, then I can just send you the figures.
Yeah. If you don't mind.
Okay.
So
And the total anticipated spend for the current year we're in, which is 2014, will be £177,000.
You see, you can understand when there's already a huge disparity. I think it's £1 to £7 or £8 already. You can then understand the frustration and the anger that there is in the Ulster Scots community that I get on a constant basis. When you speak to people who are involved in groups on the ground and indeed the community network, who are going from hand to mouth in terms of funding, that there is another £625,000 added, 2 more staff to the budget going to Forrest na Gaeilge, and not a single penny or hour of time added to that of the Ulster Scots Agency, despite a question going in and a commitment being made 10 months ago.
Well, I mean, in terms of the Ministerial Advisory Group, the Ulster Scots Academy, they did receive in-year funding, which actually boosted what they had available to spend during their years. So the original spend was set at £1 million per year, so it was £4 million over the years.
Arthur, you are deliberately trying to muddy the waters. I am talking about extra resource I asked from the Minister in the Chamber in terms of resource and money for Ulster Scots for a LIFA type project. And you answered earlier on saying that the advisory group has set up and I've met the consultants who are doing that work, but there has been no further expenditure.
Yes,
and no extra resource given.
I agreed that earlier, yes.
Yes. Then what are you trying to muddy the water for with giving me that spiel that you're coming out with there? We've established that there's no extra money.
Well, I mean, I did think in a previous...
Chairman, I don't think that's the language that we should be using here, though somebody's making a presentation accusing them of coming out with spiel and intimating that they...
I am quite happy to chair the meeting without assistance. I can make, I think, appropriate decisions. There is a point at which things go too far, but I mean, and I think we had that earlier on, but Arthur's addressing the point which was been raised. That's fine. Could I ask?
Sorry, Chair, could I just, I think Mr. Humphrey and I covered this point before, and the point that perhaps I'm expressing badly, the point I'm trying to make is that if you look at the statutory comparison of, we have an Ulster Scots HA and a Forest na Gaeilge, and there are different levels of funding there, and that's due to the history of both organisations. Pre to the Good Friday Agreement, there was an infrastructure in the on the Irish language side. And there was a smaller structure, so there's a historical starting point that is different in terms of when those two organisations were created and their opening budgets, and that has been carried forward.
Let me just pick up on that point, because I can recall those days only too well. There was a series of bodies, ANGUM and all these other bodies, that came together to create Forest. There was a blank sheet of paper on the other side. And civil servants were put in there, and I say that because both of them are gone, thankfully, a long time ago. There was a shambolic situation created with people who were incapable of doing, and one ends up in particular difficulties. So civil servants didn't exactly serve that community well at that time, and neither did the department, because they were the people who put them there. Assuming this was the NIO at the very start, probably. But You've different scenarios. The issue I'd like to raise there in that there is a single equality scheme for the language body. I think that's correct. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. How can you have a single equality scheme when there's such a huge differential in the funding for the two sides?
Well, the principles of equality are the same. I don't understand, Chair, where the money comes into it. The principles of equality are the same. That's what's set out in the scheme. The scheme doesn't actually.
The scheme doesn't address the issue. For me, equality would mean equality of resources as one aspect of equality. Be interested to know just how you.
Chair, I just wanted to come back to that.
Well, I think, Chair, that the Minister has on occasions that it is based on need. Funding is based on need.
But Arthur, I get the point that in terms of history and the timeline, in terms of the Irish language, it's much further down its developmental timeline, and the structures that were there at the time of the Belfast Agreement. All of that I get, and all of that I know. The point I'm making, I'm trying to get across, is the frustration of the Ulster Scots community that those imbalances continue. And the point I've managed to get out here is that on top of that imbalance, we've heard of extra money going from the Department of Education over and above its budget that already puts into Irish language through Irish language schools, and also there's extra £625,000 going from the department to Irish language over and above that goes to Forest na Gaeilge. That's the point I'm making. So those imbalances, that gap, instead of narrowing and delivering equality, because equality delayed is equality denied. Instead of dealing with that issue of equality, you're actually broadening the gap that there is.
The point, I think, has been quite forcibly and clearly and properly made. Could I just ask a couple of points here? Profits from printing and publishing books, which is something that Forest does through, I think it's Ash, but doesn't happen on the Ulster Scots side. Do the profits not get fed back into, what happens to the profits?
They're part of our annual budget.
So you get keeping the profits of that? How much profit would there be? This is like a mastermind.
Yeah, it is. When you would, our profits for Ash shows somewhere in the region of 450,000. That does not include distribution costs or staffing costs, which are covered as part of our staffing costs.
So the 450 at the end of the day is profit after you've taken salaries out or not?
No, we haven't taken salaries out of that.
How many people are employed in there? Three. So.
Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry.
4. So with all the vast salaries that I know everybody in the public sector gets, we're taking, say, you're down to a profit of about 300,000 or something, 250,000 or 300.
Somewhere around.
Yeah, right,
about 250, 300 euro. Yeah.
Okay. So there's an issue there again, whereby the differential between the two bodies, and that one can raise money through publishing and the other can't. I think that's an issue. Could I also ask there, just looking at the annual accounts and so on, There was a fixed assets disposal of €2 million in for us. What was written down at that stage, or what was disposed of?
Sorry, Chair, I would have to go and check that and come back to you.
Right.
And I'm very sorry about that. I know I'm the accounting officer.
Sorry, I know it is a mastermind thing. This. Now, that was December 12, the 2012 accounts. I have a few questions there. Just if members are happy, we could put them down in writing to you on those.
Well, sorry, if you want to ask me them now, Chair, and if I can answer them now, I will answer them. Okay. And if not, I'll come back to you.
Right. Also, in terms of ash, there was a provision of around €137,000 for bad debt provision. Do you find that difficulties with bookshops or whatever paying?
Well, there is a historical element here to this. From 2001 until 2011, there was no manager in Ash. It was being managed from the corner of someone else's desk.
Okay.
So there was a build-up of debts, and as we all know, bookshops, unfortunately, everywhere are experiencing serious difficulties. Book sales are experiencing serious difficulties. And I think that, I'd just like to put this on the record, I'm very pleased to say that for 2014, the Ash staff managed to keep their sales at 94% of 2013. So historically, there were debts which had been built up because there was no one actively managing.
Do they eventually get written off, or how does
yes,
that
they will. Some have already been written off. More will be written off this year.
Okay. There was another issue.
Because we now have a manager in that.
Thank you. There was also in there for the 2012 accounts €342,800, where it says the external auditors examined a sample of payments to suppliers and identified payments totaling €342,800 where procurement procedures employed didn't comply with the procedures set out in the financial memorandum. What sort of non-compliance are you talking about?
In 4 of the cases, Chair, it was a rollover of a contract which had been previously tendered.
All right, so it hadn't been let again?
Yes. It was an oversight. It shouldn't have happened. The other case was someone who does layout of advertisements, booklets and so on for us, who also had Irish. Not very many people who do that work had or has Irish. So we were going to that person to get the work done without tendering. We shouldn't have been doing it, but we were. We have since addressed, and we are continuing to address the problems. And I'm very pleased to say that the 2013 accounts were signed off in December with no qualification from the CNAG in Dublin or the NIAO.
And final point is back to Arthur there. Insofar as the forest is sort of dealt with and overseen by Dublin, basically, in practical terms.
I know that sponsorship responsibility.
I appreciate that, but you'll appreciate in practice when it comes to the Ulster Agency, work is generally done within DCAL.
No, I wouldn't accept that, Chair. It's a joint responsibility, and both sponsor departments play an active role in carrying out their sponsorship duties.
Yes, they have sponsorship
at a meeting
joint.
this Monday, where both chief executives and their senior teams met with the senior sponsors in the departments.
I
accountability
appreciate the fact we're dancing in the head of a pin here, because in reality, having been in the department, I am conscious of the way that the thing operates, and there's a nominal thing and a legal and technical, but there's a practical reality.
Chair, I'm afraid I would have to disagree with you. That is not the case.
Well, that's interesting. Could I ask then why it is that there's such a difference then in the way in which, when you look at the Controller and Auditor General, looking at issues around the agency, and then do both Controller and Auditor Generals deal, and do both of them go through the two bodies in exactly the same way?
I'll let the accounting officer take this turn.
Right.
The situation is, Chair, that by the 31st of March this year, we will have submitted our annual report and accounts for 2014 to the departments, to the CNAG and to the NIAO.
Right.
Now, our site audit is carried out by the CNAG. The Ulster Scots site audit is carried out by the NIAO. but there is a constant tic-tac between the two.
So one takes the lead, but the other
has sight of it.
That's the sort of point I was trying to get across, Arthur.
Before the accounts...
So you would acknowledge, I think, then, that the point I was trying
Sorry,
to
Chair, I
make.
thought you were referring to the role of sponsor departments. Yes, in terms of how the auditors work.
But what happens then, Chair, is that when the CNAG has finished with his queries on our accounts, they then go to the NIAO, and vice versa. We then get queries through the CNAG's office in Dublin from the NIAO. The Ulster Scots Agency get queries via the NIAO from the CNAG's office in Dublin, and then they both agree a final set of accounts, which are then signed, and then they both sign the audit cert.
That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah. Chair, just to follow on, because I was a bit concerned about that qualification myself, but you've answered that well. And it's particularly important, I think, because there are quite a few declarations of interest from board members and employees. So that's out of the way. But there was one other thing in the accounts that caught my eye. Perhaps you could maybe explain it to some extent. The pension liability is actually increased by 50%.
My understanding is that that is to do with something called FRS 17, which is to do with the way the pension liability is now worked out by the actuaries and by the administrator of the North-South Pension Scheme.
Was that a change then during the year, ending December 12?
No, I think that actually came in 2011. I'll have to check that for you and come back.
Yes, thank you for that, yeah.
Thank you very much indeed for the presentation there. Yeah. We're not always as fractious. Just most of the time.
It's just a bad day.
I can't remember exactly when, but not always as fractious.
Chair, when I have checked the fixed asset write down and the pension liability increase, I'll get back to the Secretariat of the committee.
We're saying FRS 17 sounds like a chemical.
Wait till you read FRS 4.
Oh, right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All rules, yes.
Chair, now the presentations are over, can I make a proposal that the committee writes to the Minister outlining after the presentation today by Coltis Couturier of the lack of funding that they actually receiving, and they to flag it up with the Minister.
Well, could we tag on to that then the equivalent funding for the Confederation of Ulster Bands and for the band sector?
No, I think
comparison.
Sorry, is there a difference?
they're two separate.
Yeah, 34,000 as opposed to whatever, 800. And
what's 34,000?
Was the figure given from the Arts Council to the Coltis Couturier?
And I think there were 200 and something people playing in Belfast.
My understanding is the Ulster Bands Confederation doesn't get a penny.
So that's a point there. That's interesting. Doesn't get a penny. So I think we'd need to write about both, wouldn't we? How would you propose that we write and say get additional funding for the marching band sector?
So I've asked for a proposal that we write and highlight the lack of funding that goes to Coltis Couturier.
Well, we wouldn't want to be partisan, would we? So therefore, we actually need to include
Not
both.
under equality.
Would you have any propose that we get funding for the Confederation of Ulster Bands as well then?
No, I asked you about Coltis.
Well then,
I don't think. I think the hearing barrier here.
No. Just a desire for that.
Language barrier.
Remember the Island of Equals argument that I used to see on banners?
In Ireland equals, then you have no problem with Irish language. Actually.
Some more equal than others.
Some are more equal than others. Thank you very much. Well done. I don't think that's going to go anywhere. Let's just now look at the next item on the agenda, which is matters arising. Correspondence tracker, page 57. Any issues members have there? We'll move through these pretty quickly. Right. Decal response at page 58, providing clarification of upcoming consultations.
The man's just walked in.
Try not to take too long. Losing the will to live.
This is, members will be aware, an extra 5 million was given for regional stadiums budget and was reallocated from GA to other sports. Details of the proposed balance funding with GA and football for the regional stadia has been provided. That was considered briefly at last week's meeting, but it was put back in case anyone wanted to come back on that. Amy?
Sorry, what was that, Chair? What was it?
There was £5 million there. It was in regard to the decal response at page 58. And then on page 59 it sets out IFA and GA how much money is for regional stadium programme. The sub-regional, there was £5 million put in there for GA, but also the 36 for football, and there's a background letter to that. I know you're taking a particular interest there in the sub-regional stadia.
Yeah, I think some of the clubs are now in the process of putting plans together, and actually some have actually made actual planning applications at this stage, in the hope of being shovel ready if there was any finance available. I know we had previously received a detailed timescale of how the Minister was going to progress this sub-regional, but they were hoping that maybe there was something in between times where people could make a start. But Peter, do you know any more than
Chair,
that?
the only new factor now is there has been funding from the Finance Minister's statement earlier in the week. The department has gained funding now to put together a business case for the sub-regional stadia. So that means that can now start to actually get into planning stage. So we've entered that 2-year planning stage before the 2-year phase of actual physical implementation of that. So we now have, the department now has money to start that planning phase.
And the other thing which sits outside the sub-regional is the designated stadiums who are regulated by the Stormont rules here, basically. What assistance there is for them in relation to complying with the regulations in health and safety.
Chair, at last week's meeting we also had clarification from the department as to how the designation works, the rules around that, and the procedure that can then be gone through. We talked about the role the IFA has in that as well. Now that there has been money secured to develop this business case, I'm assuming that will all, there'll start to be more consultation about that as well.
Yep, there's a lot of stuff going on out there in the sector at the moment in relation to some consultants and that who are trying to progress clubs to certain levels, and there's a concern that clubs who don't have access to maybe finance could be left behind as well, because there's promises being made by some consultants that if you engage them, you're in the pot. And I think they need to be very clear and keep it as wide ranging and open as possible. You know.
Okay. Rory Muskelley, the Stadium Programme Director, is due to brief the committee next week with an update on the redevelopment of Casement Park as well. Page 62. Waterways Ireland response. This was considered last week's meeting, but it was agreed to return to it this week. We understand that the department is currently preparing a paper that ties up the loose ends on this, and Peter can clarify if necessary.
Sure, that's kind of as much as I'm aware of. We've had a lot of correspondence with both the Minister and Waterways Ireland. I understand that coming out of last week's meeting, the department is preparing something that will give an overall picture, if I can put it that way. So we're waiting for that now.
An overall picture of what?
Of many of the questions we've asked with Waterways Ireland and a number of the issues that have been raised by the committee. Also, I'm assuming, and again, I'm not sure what's in the paper, it'll be one of those cases of getting it and seeing what there is in it and whether it does cover everything.
Do we have a time scale for when that's to be right, or can we...
Chair, I'm not able to say that at the minute. We just know that something's being prepared.
We just write and ask them when they will be in a position to deal with that.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll return to this once the department's paper has been received. Next item there, members, to the Minister for Finance and Personnel budget statement at page 65, which was delivered to the House on Monday of this week. And
Chair, again, this is really just to say we sent it out to members at the time, and I flagged up the highlights, if you like, and those are literally highlighted within the document itself. It was an interesting statement purely because it dealt with January monitoring as well as the 15-16 budget. But highlights for DCAL, certainly from January monitoring, were money for the Ulster Orchestra, which we'll deal with in a second as well, and additional money for sporting events within that. Also, members will have noted that the overall budget position for Decal next year has changed slightly from a 10% cut. It's down to around an 8% cut. There's 2 million additional there through various different things that I don't have detail on yet, but just to flag up to members that the cut to the department's budget is less than had originally been intended, and that has come out of the negotiations, obviously, in the executive. We'll find out more on that.
Can I ask, Chair, Park's mentioned two things, but he hasn't mentioned the 1.3 million of additional capital.
Yes.
For promoting equality, poverty and social exclusion. What was that exactly?
I, off the top of my head, can't recall the detail on that, but again, it's a figure that had been mentioned before, and I suspect we do have documentation on that previously, but I honestly, off the top of my head, can't recall the exact detail.
It's capital spend rather than revenue. Perhaps we could just find out what it actually is. Are we as a committee, given that I do think the issue about the bans and whatever in terms of lack of funding, are we planning to do anything about making a submission about increased funding for?
I think if we could look at that in the context, another number of weeks we'll be coming to.
I'm happy enough to do it, that's okay, Chair.
Yes.
Just said, flag it, if we're going to do it, that's okay, fine.
It's fine. Next item then, referring members to the research paper at page 93 on public expenditure statistical analysis. That was developed following last week's meeting where members queried how the figure of £92 per capita was invested in the cultural sector. And Peter?
Dr Hull has done us a paper, Chair, that is in the members' pack, and it basically indicates where that £92 figure is derived. The caveat on that is that that's a centrally produced figure that looks at specific elements, but in each jurisdiction there will obviously be spends that go beyond that or are outside it. That's not being captured necessarily in that figure. So it explains where the figure comes from, but to actually go into detail in each of the jurisdictions would be a lengthy piece of research. Really what we were looking at was to where that £92 actually derives.
Okay. It's very difficult to get. You're not always comparing like with like in these things, I think, but broadly, where the figures for Northern Ireland are not as bad as might have been suggested. Okay, there's a tabled paper from our letter of email from the Ulster Orchestra.
Chair, this was emailed to me earlier in the week, so as such is I suppose not necessarily an official publication or anything like that. It's from Sir George Bain, and he just deals with the issue I'd suggested before. Now, at this stage, this was before a final outcome in the budget statement, so he had anticipated roughly the amount we think is coming to the Ulster Orchestra. But I should flag up again that that's from January monitoring. Therefore, members will remember the budget model that the Ulster Orchestra had developed looked at a figure of 855,000 on an annual basis coming from Decal of the Executive. What that effectively did was put the Ulster Orchestra's funding back to around 2010-2011. That figure has obviously not materialised for this current period, and we really don't know what's going to happen going forward. This is January monitoring money. It will effectively, combined with the promise and the comfort given by Belfast City Council, gives them a pot of £500,000 now to go forwards with. I think it might be useful, Chair, to have another discussion with the Ulster Orchestra as to where that leaves them, because it's really only half of what they were talking about and what they were basing their new model of operation around. So in terms of ultimately what is going to happen going forward, we're still just not that sure.
Okay, yes.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks very much. I think first of all we'd welcome the funding for the Ulster Orchestra. I think we're all very much aware of the need of it and the excellent job that they do.
I'm sure the member will want to be there then on Saturday night to enjoy the Ulster Orchestra.
We'll move on. And of course, I have to, the subject.
And the member beside him as well.
Working to the new model of management, and I think the point is well made that we perhaps should have further discussions with them as to see how they're going to move forward. Because it is important that they do bring about change and that they work more efficiently and more effectively. And I hope that the concert goes well, by the way, on Saturday night.
And I'm sure other members of the committee will also want to be there on Saturday night.
Chair, I think from the email that Sir George had sent, he's looking for a frank discussion, which may best be done if we set up an informal environment where members can talk to Sir George without the constraints of a formal committee. So if I move forward on that and keep members in the loop as to when and where, we look to try and do it on a Monday or Tuesday so that members are here. And I'll speak to Sir George about his availability on that.
Could you, in response to that, could you inquire of the department if there's any potential for using FTC to assist the orchestra, whether it's possible to do it?
Is that not capital money?
It's loan or equity. And
yeah, but does it not?
Well, one of the things that you might be able to do is buy them with a loan to let them restructure. That might be a bridging thing.
Okay, we'll invest. Okay, I'll inquire that.
Just if that's such a thing were possible, or free, I just want to know if the department has to consider it.
And if it's not, we'll say you're the one who came up with the idea. Right, next item on the agenda then is decal summary of responses to the budget consultation, page 100. There were 9,850 responses and a petition signed by over 13,440 people. Decal has broken down the areas of interest it highlighted in the responses from both individuals and organisations. The committee has a briefing from Decal scheduled for next week's meeting on the subject. However, as the Finance Minister has now issued a statement, the briefing is somewhat behind the times. On that basis, would members be happy that we replace that briefing with the briefing on Casement Park?
Great.
Before you go into that, just in light of the earlier question asked, I understand that I think it's the Tuesday, first Tuesday and Tuesday, that the budget debate is coming to the floor of the Assembly. Is that correct? Is it the...
Chair, I've heard. I couldn't pin down it, but I've heard there's a...
I just wonder if, in light of this and your earlier saying that we were going to address it at some stage, I think we do, as a committee, need to have some time in the schedule to talk about the cuts and what we might want to be doing. So I'm happy, work with you, Chair, just if you could find a way of putting that in before we actually talk about it on the floor of the Assembly.
Right. Also, the tabled memo from the Committee for Enterprise, Trade and Investment regarding the committee's inquiry into growing the economy and creating jobs with lower corporation tax. If members are happy to note at this stage.
Great.
Chairperson's business, a couple of things quickly. Committee office has received an invitation from the South East Regional College in Bangor, in North Down, to hold a future committee meeting at the campus to include a tour of the new Performing Arts and Technology Innovation Centre in Bangor. Completion of the centre is planned for after Easter. The committee received a briefing on the plans for the centre during its work on facilities for teaching of the performing arts in Northern Ireland. And if you'd be happy to schedule an external meeting and visit for the meeting of the 14th of May.
May?
Yes, May. Otherwise, we'll never be here. 14th of May, that's it. Right, happy enough of that.
I thought that was March there, sorry.
Right, May. Next thing then, quickly, there was a letter went off to the department last week about the membership of the groups dealing, and it was a point raised earlier with Arthur, those dealing with the arts and culture strategy. Apparently there's been a press release put out by the department.
All members received.
Which will be on our...
Jonathan emailed it out to all members, Chair.
Just came in the last hour.
Yeah, it happened during the meeting, so we've sent it straight on the miracle of the tablet in the committee room.
So we don't know, we haven't had a reply to our letter. We don't know whether our views have been taken on board or not, but an announcement has already been made. So I just note the fact that not only have they announced it, they've held their first meeting. So unless there's been a sudden rush to invite additional people, it does seem that the views of the committee may not have been taken into consideration, but we'll find out.
Can we just get it put on, because it's too late now, put it in the papers for next week. That come back
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. We'll need to get more information anyway.
Absolutely.
It basically boils down to the Ministerial Advisory Forum, which was part of the dual structure of this arts and culture strategy development. There's the departments getting together, and then there's the Ministerial Art Advisory Forum. which is sectoral. That was the one the committee had written about to get further representation onto. It met at some point today. There isn't a time in the...
Chair, just I share your frustration. You know, we should, we'll put it on the agenda for next week, but I do think that we should write and ask for an explanation, is that we are entitled to know what's going on. So if you want someone to propose that we do that, I would do so.
Yes, well, if Mr McRae is happy to take a slight amendment to that, I'm happy to do that, but I do think we should put something in the public domain as well. There's a committee we wrote and this has happened without our knowledge.
If we get the facts ascertained, because it's over the line now anyway, so whether we do it today or after next week, we get all the facts on this.
Okay.
Because what we were told was that this was an indicative list of people. We'll now find out who was actually invited to the meeting and who was at the meeting and what notice they got. Yep.
Karen Donnelly and Oliver's on it.
Final thing then, for work programme is set out page 113. Clark?
Chair, if I just give rapid highlights. Next week's meeting is here, but members will recall we're having Special Olympics Ulster in. Our hope had been that they would be able to launch their new kit because they're going to Los Angeles in the summer. The kit isn't at launch stage yet, but they're going to come anyway, and what we're going to do is the committee will start a countdown for their trip to the United States to take part in the Special Olympics there. So they come and they'll brief on what they're doing, and then we move into the Great Halls for photographs, and then we have lunch with them as well. So just flagging that up to members. The 5th of February, members will recall, we're at Sport NI's headquarters, House of Sport. We're also visiting facilities at the Dub, New Forge Lane, as part of our looking at the sharing of sports facilities. So just to flag that up to members, there will be a bus for that. Then the meeting on the 26th of February, members had agreed to go down to the offices of Brain Injury Matters on the Castlereagh Road. They'd written to invite us down there. What has also occurred to us is that they do a lot of art therapy, so if members are content, we'll actually look to absorb that into the inquiry as well. We had planned to finish evidence gathering today with the two briefings we had, but with members' indulgence, because we've not seen art therapy on the ground before, it might just be a useful opportunity to do that if members are content.
That's also then on the 5th of March, travelling up to Londonderry for the meeting at the Northern Ireland Science Park for Creativity Month.
If members are content, Chair, that members will recall we do something every year for Creativity Month. We have an invitation to the newly established, it's quite recently opened, Northern Ireland Science Park up in Londonderry. They do a lot of digital work. It's very high-end digital production companies and apps and so on. So if members are content, we'll go ahead and organise that for the 5th of March.
Content? Good.
Thank you.
And the next meeting of the committee then, Thursday the 29th at 10.
Chair, just before we finish, I'm making a plea on behalf of Julie Andrews that members met last week at the Linen Hall Library. Julie is setting up a focus group. I'd emailed members out about this. She's really keen that she gets a cross-party group of MLAs to talk to her about what goes on with the political collection. We've had one volunteer already. I'm really looking for other members to do that. And the final thing, Julie had mentioned at the committee meeting last week, and we weren't in session at the time, about her funding. The funding for the Linen Hall Library, they get a funding pot from the department. What she requested, members may recall, was that is cut by no more than what libraries generally are getting, cut to 7.5% that members are aware of.
Mr Dunn will represent the
Are members content to write to the department to ask for that on the committee's behalf?
No time for
Content?
Chair.
Are we just writing to find out what they're proposing?
No, to say that the cut for Linen Hall shouldn't be greater than for other libraries, because it is used widely by the general public. It's not a...
And the chairman as well.
And the chairman. I have to declare an interest as a member. Yes.
Are members content to do that?
You represent us.
Great.
Thank you.
Finished?
Adjourned?
Okay.
I should do.
Any other business, Chair? No.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.